Chapter 34:11. Kik, the voice was very proud, its laughter resounding through the heavens and earth. It shouted, "My Tao sect is a sect that seizes the good fortune of the heavens and earth. How can Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects be compared to it? Although my Tao sect was destroyed by them, their divine abilities and methods will forever be unknown to them. Although this old man was suppressed by them due to a moment of carelessness, this old man also profited from the disaster, and had the opportunity to use my Tao sect's supreme secret technique to entrust my primordial spirit to the yin-yang illustration handbook. Now that this old man has an immortal and indestructible body, who in this world can be my opponent?" Primordial spirit entrusting technique? Fantian's nascent soul had already slowly sunk into his body. Fantian slowly opened his eyes and asked himself in confusion. Obviously, he didn't understand what the primordial spirit entrusting technique was. The primordial spirit entrusting technique is a secret technique left behind by the immortal realm. How would a mere nascent soul cultivator like you know? Have you seen this old man's methods? The voice shouted coldly, and the big hand suddenly opened up, instantly expanding by several times. It didn't care that he had already destroyed 40% of the icicles and covered the entire 4 mountains. He said, "Follow this old man. If you succeed under this old man will definitely help you become an immortal after my Tao sect prospers. This old man can also teach you this secret technique from the immortal realm." As he said that, a fiery red pill the size of a thumb flew out from the big hand and landed in front of Fantian's eyes. Fire god pill? This is for the nascent soul to leave the body. Fantian saw this pill and his face flashed with shock. A strange look couldn't help but drift across his eyes. That's right, this is the fire god pill that this old man refined. It's really suitable for cultivators like you who practice water-based techniques to leave the body. You bumped into this old man. This is your chance. Of course, it can also be said that this old man's escape is your good fortune. This is a chance given to you by the heavenly Tao. Other than this old man, in these 3 continents, who else can easily refine the fire god pill? Who else can so easily bestow the fire god pill to you? You really want to bestow the fire god pill to me? Fantian's tone had already softened. What do you want this old man to do? Very simple. It's as easy as lifting a finger for you. The voice was resolute and unquestionable. It's just that this old man can't say it now. You'll know when you follow this old man. As he spoke, the giant hand made a grabbing motion. The entire ground shook, and the 4 mountains seemed to be uprooted from the ground. Flipping Sky looked at the fire god pill in front of him, then looked at the violently shaking icicles and the 4 trembling mountains. With a sigh, he really couldn't resist this temptation. After sighing, he opened his mouth and spat out a breath of clear air onto the ice seed pearl. Buzz, the ice seed pearl, which was originally like ice dregs, began to rotate. Waves of brilliance splashed out, and gradually turned into a sparkling and translucent white pearl. The splash brilliance fell on the icicles, and the entire icicles collapsed with a loud bang. This collapse was very strange. It was from the outside to the inside. The outermost part of the icicles that connected to the 4 mountains was the first to melt. Without waiting for the icicles to completely disappear, the giant hand made a grabbing motion in midair. The icicles between the 4 mountains, along with Flipping Sky himself, were all caught by the giant hand. Amidst the howling winds, the dark clouds rolled and flew into the distance. In a moment, they disappeared, leaving behind only the 4 bare mountains and the mess between the mountains. Just as the dark clouds passed, there were immediately thousands of gusts of wind descending from the sky. The chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred miles surged back and forth. After a full half a day, the wind stopped. However, the countless chi of heaven and earth in this space had already triggered a celestial phenomenon. When the wind stopped, the dark clouds were densely gathered again. Without waiting for the moonlight to shine, there was a heavy downpour. Hail the size of a fist poured down, covering the area within 100 miles, especially between the 4 mountains. The sky was pitch black, but within the pitch black, there was a kind of transparency. That transparency was the layers of water light. Flipping Sky's ice seed pearl condensed the water-based chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred, or even 1,000 miles. The giant hand formed by the Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook suddenly absorbed the chi of heaven and earth, causing a loss of the chi of heaven and earth. The Grand Duke of Heavenly Tao, the surrounding chi of heaven and earth gathered here. How could a normal celestial phenomenon withstand so much water-based chi of heaven and earth? Now, the chi of heaven and earth had all condensed into hail within the raindrops. It fell crazily, and a rare mountain torrential rain suddenly appeared. Fortunately, Flipping Sky was cultivating in the wilderness, and there were no traces of people. Within 10 days, the wind and rain were dense, and there were no casualties. Another 4 to 5 days passed, and the wind and rain stopped. It was a sunny day, and the sound of waterfalls could be seen from the 4 mountain peaks. It was already another paradise. Especially between the mountain peaks, there were large and small ponds and lakes everywhere. Even if Flipping Sky came back again, he probably wouldn't be able to recognize the earth-shaking changes here. Since even Flipping Sky couldn't recognize this new scenery, then Xian, Ci Hui Boy, and Xiao Hua who was accompanying Ci Hui Boy from afar wouldn't be able to recognize it. The two beasts stopped in mid-air, and Xian floated down from the strange bird. She stepped on the auspicious cloud, and landed in the middle of the 4 mountain peaks. She released her Yuanshen and looked at it again and again. She reached out her hand, and took out a diamond-shaped crystal object. Although she held it in her hand, she hesitated and didn't release it. Ci Hui Boy saw Xian's doubts, and also jumped down from the azure lion. She flew in front of Xian and said with a smile, "Xian Tanyu, is there anything wrong? You didn't hesitate at all along the way, and there was no deviation at all. Why did you stop here? This is the communication magic tool of the Taoist fellow immortal, right? Why didn't you send it out?" Xian smiled bitterly, and turned to look at the water under the scorching sun. She said, "Ci Hui immortal friend, release your Buddhist awareness to check it out. Of course, if you have a Buddhist magic like Heavenly Eye, you can also use it. You can find some clues at that time." Oh. Ci Hui raised her eyebrows and didn't release her Buddhist awareness. Instead, she said with a smile, "Since Tanyu has found something wrong, why don't you tell me? Why do I have to do something unnecessary?" Hearing Ci Hui's words, Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A trace of helplessness flashed on her face. She said, "You Buddhist disciples are good at everything except this. You don't have any curiosity. Didn't you see the great change in the chi of heaven and earth here? The ponds between the 4 mountain peaks are also newly formed. Don't tell me you don't want to see for yourself what caused such a huge change." "I don't want to." Ci Hui still smiled and replied faintly, "There are 10,000 truths for everything in the world. The truth of every matter is different. Outside of this truth, there are also endless illusions. But if the world only sees illusions, who can discern the only truth? Even if I have Heavenly Eye or destiny connection, I can't see all the truths one by one. Amitba, only my Buddha knows all the truths. If my Buddha lets me know, I don't need to pray, I will naturally know. But what if my Buddha doesn't let me know? Even if I wear out iron shoes, it's absolutely impossible for me to know the truth." Xian didn't have any reaction facing Ci Hui. She seemed to be used to these words. But Xiao Hua, who was lazily staying on the back of the azure lion, was suddenly stunned. That beautiful face flashed in his mind from time to time. That unforgettable voice sounded again. "TCH brother-in-law is really a miser. Actually, in my opinion, the most beautiful thing in this world is none other than a confusing secret. All the secrets are hidden behind countless false appearances. Finding the essence of the matter from these fragmented clues is the most beautiful thing." Seeing Xiao Hua stunned, Ci Hui's face showed a trace of a gratified smile. Her words weren't said to Xian. Although Xian was a Confucian cultivator, her attainments in Buddhist principles were admirable even to Ci Hui. Although this kind of Buddhist principles were profound, Ci Hui didn't think that Xian wouldn't understand. Ci Hui's words were deliberately to help Xiao Hua. Along the way, Xiao Hua left a very good impression on Ci Hui. Xiao Hua was originally a curious person. He liked to get to the bottom of ordinary matters. Now that he met Xi Hui of the Buddhist sect, how could Xiao Hua, who had always been puzzled about Buddhist principles, give up such a good opportunity? From the beginning with a smattering of knowledge to now with a rough understanding, Xiao Hua's attainments in Buddhist principles were absolutely advancing by leaps and bounds. Xi Hui certainly didn't know that Xiao Hua had a Buddha Sarira in his Naiwan palace that was reciting the Buddhist scriptures of the exquisite temple day and night. Moreover, after Xiao Hua discovered the spiritual energy, it seemed that his spiritual cavities had opened up. Whether it was the comprehension of Taoist techniques, Buddhist principles, or even the cultivation of Devil World's blood drop paradise, his progress was extremely fast. This made Xi Hui feel that Xiao Hua was an extremely intelligent Buddhist disciple. And the convergence of psychokinesis on the snowy mountain made Xi Hui more and more aware that Xiao Hua was the reincarnation of a senior monk with extremely heavy roots. Along the way, Xi Hui also talked about Buddhist principles with Xiao Hua without reserve. At this time, he encountered an excellent opportunity, so he naturally wouldn't give up. He casually talked about things and enlightened Xiao Hua on the essence of Buddhist principles. Unfortunately, Xi Hui couldn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. No matter what, he didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. Jiuxia's words and Xi Hui's words are all referring to the essence and appearance of all things in the world. As the saying goes, different Daos cannot work together. The two people's thoughts and actions are so different. However, what is the real relationship between the two? Everyone has their own reasons. I don't know where Jiuxia came from, but he emphasized on taking the initiative, seeking the first opportunity in all things. It's somewhat similar to my Taoist sect's cultivation method, which only strives for the vitality between heaven and earth. And Xi Hui came from Buddhist sect, which emphasizes tolerance, obedience, and doesn't seek to stand out in all things. My thoughts are naturally in line with Jiuxia's. However, Buddhist sect is the same as Taoist sect's cultivation path. How can my knowledge be inferior to Taoist sect's? Even if it's different, it's still another path. Now that I want to cultivate both Buddhist and Taoist techniques, where should I go from here? Chapter 34:12. You'd better welcome your Buddhist senior. Xian saw a flash of understanding in Xi Hui's eyes, and knew that he had gained something. She smiled and said, "Perhaps this senior can give you more guidance." A roar that sounded like a lion's roar came from afar, and a purple cloud drifted over. On the cloud stood a purple-haired hoe that was twice as tall as the azure lion. The purple-haired hoe's purple hair was several feet long, fluttering in the wind. On the ferocious beast's head, there was no fierceness in its fist-sized eyes. Instead, it had a very warm gaze that made people feel comfortable looking at it. Especially when it shook its head. There was a large collar with 2 silver bells around its neck. The clang 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 sound was even more pleasing to the ears. On the purple-haired hoe's back was a tall monk. The monk's face was simple and unadorned. His eyebrows were white, and the half-foot beard below his chin was also mixed with gray. The monk wore a gray monk's robe with a scabbard hanging from his waist. One of his hands was placed in front of his chest, and the other was holding a demon-subduing pestle that was as thick as a duck egg. The monk's eyes were like stars. He didn't look at Xi Hui, Xian, and Xiao Hua. Instead, he looked at the 4 extremes mountains with puzzlement like Xian did before. Ba, Junior Xi Hui of Green Lotus Temple greets Senior Xi Hui didn't dare to be negligent. Before the monk withdrew his gaze, he stepped forward and bowed with his palms together. Seeing Xi Hui step forward, Xiao Hua also braced himself and bowed. Junior Bodhi of Small Exquisite Temple greets Senior. However, Xian wasn't in a hurry to go over. With a smile on her face, she waited for the Buddhist disciples to greet each other. The monk nodded slightly and said, "I'm Gu Zhen of Red Lotus Temple. Are you here to find Dao Sect's Venerable Fan Tian?" Hearing the old monk say his Dharma name, Xi Hui didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly replied, "Grandmaster, yes. We're here to find Venerable Fan Tian for some matters." "What's the matter?" Gu Zhen frowned and asked faintly, "You're a Buddhist disciple. Why are you so close to the remnants of Dao sect?" This Xi Hui was a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, "I don't know Lord Fan Tian, but I came here with this female Tanyu. I am Xian, a Confucian cultivator. Greetings, Grandmaster Guzhen. Xian didn't show any uneasiness on his face as he stepped forward and bowed. And which sect is this little girl from? Or which up-and-coming aristocratic family? Naturally, Guzhen knew a little about the hidden immortal continent. Hearing that the surname Xian was not a special family of Confucian cultivators, he nodded and asked. Xian smiled and said, "This one's birth is not worth mentioning, so it's best if I don't make a fool of myself. Fellow Taoists Ci Hui and this little monk were all invited by me. They don't know Venerable Overturning Heaven. However, may I know why Grandmaster Guzhen is here?" Guzhen glanced at Xian and said with a little dignity, "Venerable Overturning Heaven is a Tao sect disciple. Although he has always been very disciplined, he is still a cultivator of the 4th level of essence Qi. Now that the remnants of Tao sect are said to be rising from the ashes, this old monk was ordered by the abbot to take a look and remind Venerable Overturning Heaven not to make a mistake and enter the abyss of eternal damnation. The 3 of us also arrived here half an hour ago." Hearing this, Xian knew that things were a little strange. She didn't dare to make excuses and hurriedly explained. "The 4 extreme mountains are completely different from before. Venerable Overturning Heaven is also missing." "Oh, right, this one hasn't released my communication magic tool yet." Guzhen smiled and waved his hand. "Why don't you try releasing that magic tool?" "Yes." Xian flipped her hand and threw the rhombus-shaped magic tool into the air. Puff! Xian spat out a mouthful of true qi on it, and the rhombus-shaped magic tool slowly melted into a pool of green water. The green water flickered with light and was about to condense into the shape of a sharp arrow. However, before the arrow could condense, puff 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 with a series of chaotic sounds, the green water turned into hundreds of bubbles. "Oh." Xian raised her eyebrows in astonishment. Then, puff 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 puff, the hundreds of bubbles burst one after another, and the green water disappeared into thin air. Venerable Overturning Heaven actually died? Xian's expression changed greatly. "That's strange." Guzhen's brows furrowed. The changes in the 4 extreme mountains were obviously caused by Taoist cultivators. Venerable Overturning Heaven was a Taoist disciple with 4th grade essence force. How could they be so ruthless? Taoist disciples are always scheming against each other. Who knows what they're thinking? Perhaps Venerable Overturning Heaven wasn't very sociable and was ostracized by the Taoist disciples. Then they killed him. Xian's expression slowly returned to normal as she said faintly. However, Guzhen didn't agree and shook his head slightly. New Tanyu's thinking is too simple. Although it was an internal conflict between Taoist disciples, for a 4th grade essence force cultivator to be killed so easily, his opponent must be a 4th grade essence force cultivator or even higher. Since when did Western Paradise have such a powerful Taoist cultivator? Hee. Xian smiled faintly. This isn't the hidden immortal continent. There aren't any unfamiliar Taoist experts here. Even if this Taoist expert was a 9th grade essence force cultivator, what does it have to do with me? Guzhen's figure was huge, taller than ordinary people by more than half. His hands that were exposed outside of his monk robe were like palm leaf fans, and the demon-subduing pestle in his hand was several times larger than usual. His bell-like eyes swept across Xian, but she couldn't see his expression. However, Xian's body trembled slightly, and she hurriedly lowered her head as if she was frightened. After that, Guzhen paid no further attention to Xian and flew to the center of the 4 extreme mountains. The purple-furred Ho also shook its head and followed behind, completely ignoring the azure lion and the strange bird. Roar! Seeing the center of the 4 extreme mountains, the purple-fur Ho let out a loud roar that shook the surroundings. Guzhen waved his hand and placed the thick demon-subduing pestle on the purple-fur Ho's back. Roar! The roar was even louder than the purple-fur Ho's. Guzhen's roar was very powerful. Wherever the sound wave passed, Xian's true qi swirled around her body, and strands of golden clouds emerged from her palace dress. The clouds slightly overflowed in the sound wave and protected Xian. Xian frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "This is the Buddhist lion's roar. Grandmaster Guzhen, is this a warning?" Grandmaster Guzhen seems to be using some Buddhist divine ability. The power of this divine ability should be very strong. Ci Hui's face was still filled with respect as she answered in a low voice. This lion's roar is a warning to the Taoist cultivators who might be hiding nearby to quickly show themselves if they don't have any evil intentions. Should we leave for a moment? Xiaohua looked at Guzhen in the distance with interest and asked with a smile. As soon as Guzhen appeared, Xiaohua immediately greeted him. Unfortunately, Guzhen showed no interest in this little monk, and didn't say a word to Xiaohua. Ci Hui nodded. Grandmaster Guzhen's warning is naturally a warning to us. Let's leave this place first. With that, Ci Hui stepped onto the indigo lion. The indigo lion didn't back down and let out a roar. Then it waved its tail and flew out of the 4 extreme mountains with Ci Hui. Xian got on the strange bird, and Xiaohua also stepped onto an auspicious cloud and slowly flew out. As soon as the 3 of them flew out of the mountain, the Buddhist light in the 4 extreme mountains shone brightly. Guzhen's body grew bigger and bigger. Then a Dharma body comparable to the mighty Vajra emerged from Guzhen's body. Roar at this moment. The purple-haired Ho let out a loud roar and flew a few hundred feet away from the Dharma body. Then he opened his mouth and a fist-sized alms bowl flashed with faint Buddhist light and rushed into the air. Seeing the alms bowl slowly fly to the front of Guzhen's Dharma body, the Dharma body's giant hand also slowly waved. Chants sounded from the giant hand, and a Buddhist seal flashing with brilliant Buddhist light gradually took shape between the Dharma body's hands. Vajra Buddha seal? Ci Hui raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in a low voice. Grandmaster Guzhen is a Buddhist Dharma protector? Grandmaster Guzhen holds a demon-subduing pestle, and has a tall and sturdy figure. If he's not a Buddhist Dharma protector, then what is he? Xian smiled. However, Grandmaster Guzhen's Vajra Buddha Dharma body is actually so powerful. This is beyond my expectations. Amitba. As a Dharma protector, one's heart has sunk into oblivion. This life of cultivation can't be brought into the cycle of reincarnation. It can be considered a life of illusion. Buddhist Dharma protectors have always been respected. Grandmaster Guzhen is willing to sacrifice himself for others. This little monk truly admires you. Ci Hui couldn't help but sigh. Guzhen activated his willpower and struck the alms bowl with Vajra Buddha seals. The alms bowl grew larger, and the chants became louder and more hurried. It was as if thousands of Buddhas were chanting at the same time on the 4 extremities mountain. Withdraw. When the alms bowl grew to over 100 feet in size, Guzhen's Dharma body raised his hand as if he was stretching. He grabbed the alms bowl and exerted force with his arms. The alms bowl slowly flipped over in the air with its mouth facing downward. Guzhen's hands left the alms bowl and formed another Buddhist seal. As the seal fell, the alms bowl flashed with Buddhist light as if it was breathing. Then, a faint golden Buddhist light rushed out of the alms bowl and landed on a huge lake in the shape of a fan. The lake was rippling with blue waves, but when the blue water touched the Buddhist light, it immediately flew out of the lake. The alms bowl sucked the water in the lake in like a dragon drinking water. Xiaohua saw that there were other places covered by Buddhist light in the deep pool, and the water was being sucked away at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was puzzled and blurted out. Senior Marshal Brother Ci Hui, this old monk. Oh, that's not right. What is Grandmaster Guzhen doing? Of course he's absorbing water. Xian smiled. I'm not old yet. Can't I see it? Chapter 34:13. Xiaohua rolled his eyes at Xian and said, Do you think I don't have eyes? Can't you see that he's absorbing water? The question is, why is he absorbing water? Ci Hui was also somewhat puzzled, but he hesitated for a moment and said tentatively, Perhaps the place where Grandmaster came from encountered a drought, so he's transporting the water here to other places to relieve the drought. At this point, Ci Hui seemed to have realized something and sped up her speech. Oh, that's right. Perhaps Grandmaster Ci Hui wants to take away all of the water in the 4 Extremes Mountains to investigate the destruction of the 4 Extremes Mountain. By investigating, he might be able to find traces of that Taoist expert. There's so much water in the Four Extremes Mountains. Could it be that Master Guzhan has Grandmaster Ci Hang's water bottle? Xian was somewhat disdainful. I don't think he can take it all with his alms bowl alone. Xian Sandinyu, you're underestimating the Sumera Buddhist formation of our Buddhism sect. Ci Hui smiled. Grandmaster Guzhan's alms bowl may not be as good as Grandmaster Ci Hui's water bottle, but the Four Extremes Mountains are only a few dozen miles wide. It's not a problem. If that's the case, then that's the best. Hearing this, Xian beamed with joy. Her eyes flashed with a strange expression as she looked at the places where the alms bowl passed. The Buddhist light sucked away the deep ponds and ravines. After 4 hours, Guzhan finally absorbed all the water in the Four Extremes Mountains into the alms bowl. The alms bowl didn't change much, but Guzhan's Vajra Buddha Dharma body had shrunk by more than half, and even his Buddhist light had dimmed a lot. Guzhan looked around with satisfaction and pointed at the alms bowl. The alms bowl fell back into the purple-haired Ho's mouth, but he didn't withdraw his Dharma body. He stepped on a Buddhist cloud and headed toward one of the Four Extremes Mountains. It seems that's all there is to it. Xiaohua saw that Guzhan was very serious. He first released his Buddha's consciousness, then used his naked eyes to examine carefully. He even dropped clouds in some places. He grabbed some gravel and other things from the ground or stone walls to examine carefully. He couldn't help but nod inwardly. Xian Tanyue, seeing that Guzhan was ignoring them, Xiaohua said, "There's no longer anyone here, so you can't borrow the magic weapon you want. This little monk does not have much time. If it is possible, shall we leave now? Senior brother Ci Hui's teachings have not been in vain since this little monk is able to lend you a helping hand." Don't worry, Xian smiled. That place is very dangerous. The three of us only have a 40% chance of success. And Venerable Master Fontain's magic weapon was the nemesis of one of those dangerous situations. Now that we haven't found Venerable Master Heaven Flipping, Heaven has sent us Master Guzhan. With Master Guzhan, our chances of success have increased by 20%. Speaking of this, Xian looked at Ci Hui embarrassedly and said, "Immortal friend Ci Hui, before I only thought about the Tao sect's heaven-flipping man and the Buddhist sect-related things should be given to you. Now that we have Master Guzhan." "Haha, it's fine." Ci Hui smiled and waved her hand. "Didn't I say it just now? To be able to gain enlightenment of the Buddhist Dharma through experience is much more precious than any Buddhist weapon left behind. Besides, if this little monk coveted some Buddhist weapon, why would I invite junior brother Deepu? If Grandmaster Guzhan is of some help to you, you can invite him. This little monk does not mind." Many thanks, immortal friend Ci Hui. Xian sighed. "This way, I feel that I have wronged you. How about this? Apart from the immortal weapons and the Buddhist weapon promised to Master Guzhan, as long as you like something, you can have the priority to choose." Ci Hui shook her head. "It's useless to say so much now. You should think about how to persuade Grandmaster Guzhan. He might not be interested in this matter." Rest assured, immortal friend. Xian smiled and said, "I have a 40% chance of persuading ordinary Buddhist experts. Since Master Guzhan is a Buddhist sect's guardian, I have a 60% chance of inviting him to help." That's true. Ci Hui nodded. Buddhist sect's guardians are highly skilled. The ancient treasure that Grandmaster Tanyue mentioned is very attractive to Buddhist sect's guardians. Since this little monk can go, Grandmaster Guzhan can naturally go as well. Now, we only have to see if Grandmaster Guzhan needs to return to the temple to report. If time is too tight, I'm afraid it won't be possible. Xian expressed her concern. Immortal friend Xian Xiaohua at the side spoke. "Since Grandmaster Guzhan is here, does this little monk not need to go? This little monk really has something to do." "Little monk, whether you go or not has nothing to do with me." Xian pursed her lips and smiled. "You can ask your senior brother Ci Hui." Senior brother Xiaohua opened his mouth, but when he saw Ci Hui's smiling face, he immediately shut his mouth. He already knew the answer. He just muttered, "Forget it, just pretend this little monk didn't say anything." Xiaohua understood in his heart that Xi Hui pulled him to that place for his own good. Previously, Xi Hui wanted to explain Buddhist principles and Buddhist scriptures to Xiaohua so that his Buddhist cultivation and Buddhist sect's magical power could match, so that he wouldn't walk the path of only practicing magical power and not understanding Buddhist doctrine. Later, when he saw that Xiaohua's Buddhist sect's magical power was not inferior to his, he even wanted to help Xiaohua. He wanted Xiaohua to gain something from this trip, so he even vaguely gave Xiaohua half of the Buddhist weapons in the dangerous place. Now it was even better. With Guzhen, the guardian of the Lotus Realm, although Xiaohua might gain less benefits, it was also a lot safer. Xi Hui naturally wouldn't let him go. Jiang Luer's matter can be considered to have reached the point where it can be solved. Haste makes waste. I'd better take one step at a time. Perhaps with Xi Hui's recommendation, I don't need to worry about it. That Jinshan Temple's great Zen master Ji Kong will agree to awaken Jiang Luer from the Nirvana realm, right? Guzhen's inspection was very detailed. Half a day passed very quickly. Seeing the full moon rising, there was no other movement in the entire Four Poles Mountain except for the sound of wind. The usual birds chirping and cicadas at the foot of the mountain were also gone. Xiaohua didn't care about it at first, but after a while, he understood that this situation was probably caused when Lord Fantian fell. The cultivator, who was also a disciple of Taoism, was ruthless. Not only did he kill Lord Fantian, but all the creatures near the Four Poles Mountain were also affected. Alas, Xiaohua sighed for no reason, just like a real disciple of Tantric Buddhism. Why haven't you all left yet? A slightly tired voice sounded. Monk Guzhen had already retracted his dharmakaya. He sat cross-legged on the back of the purple-haired Ho and slowly flew over. Under the moonlight, his bright eyes were obviously more gentle than before. Xi Hui took a few steps forward and said respectfully, "Our cultivation is shallow, so we can't help Grandmaster with anything. But without Grandmaster's order, we dare not leave without permission." Cultivation base is shallow? Haha, little monk, you're belittling yourself. The purple-haired Ho had already flown to the front of the crowd. Guzhen jumped down from his mount and looked at Xi Hui from head to toe. He said lightly, "The realm of the bright eyes is a watershed. It's not a place that ordinary Buddha can enter. Little monk, you can have your current cultivation because of the root of wisdom planted early. This old monk can't compare with you." "I don't dare. Compared to Grandmaster, I'm still far behind." Xi Hui hurriedly lowered her head and put her palms together. "Everyone has their own fate," Guzhen said lightly. "This old monk envies you all for cultivating Buddhism in peace. You can enter the cycle of reincarnation and don't have to be stained with karma." Yes, Grandmaster and other Buddhist protectors subdued devils and demons for our Buddhism. They protect the peace of our Buddhism and the safety of our Buddha. This is what we should respect. Xi Hui said carefully. "Master, did you find anything?" Seeing that the scene was a bit cold, Xian hurriedly asked and led to the main topic. However, Guzhen didn't answer Xian. Instead, he looked at Xiaohua and asked, "Your Buddhist name is Tipu and you claim to be a disciple of Shaolinglong Temple. How come this old monk has never heard of this temple? You just entered our Buddhism, and you're actually also in the realm of the bright eyes. Could it be that you're also walking the path of a protector?" Xiaohua put his palms together and said with a smile, "The Shaolinglong Temple that disciple mentioned is a small temple in the mountains. It's normal that Grandmaster hasn't seen it. As for whether disciple is walking the path of a protector, disciple doesn't know. But these few days, I've been talking about Buddhism with senior brother Xi Hui. I haven't heard him talk about it. It shouldn't be." Grandmaster Xi Hui hurriedly explained, "Junior brother Tipu has deep roots in wisdom. He hasn't entered our Buddhism, but he's already cultivated to the realm of the bright eyes. He's also quite accomplished in the cultivation of Buddhism. It's just that he hasn't been fated to enter our Buddhism. Just a few days ago, when he was shaving in the Shaolinglong Temple of the Great Snow Mountain, disciple saw the corpse of the Shaolinglong Temple with his own eyes." Guzhen nodded and didn't comment. He looked at Xian and said, "Benefactress is a Confucian cultivator. Why are you so concerned about Fantian's death? If you don't have any secrets, Can you tell this old monk? This one doesn't care about the life and death of a Taoist disciple, Xian said with a smile. This one is just a little curious. If Grandmaster doesn't want to say it, then don't say it. Actually, it's nothing. Xian didn't want to listen anymore. Guzhan said, this old monk doesn't dare to judge whether Fantian has fallen or not. However, from the traces of the battle in the Four Extremes Mountain, it should be a Taoist cultivator, whose cultivation is far superior to Fantian's. The battle between the two involved the entire Four Extremes Mountain, and even affected the weather for hundreds of miles around the Four Extremes Mountain. Cultivation far superior to Fantian? Who is this person? Where did he come from? Xian was flabbergasted. Fantian is already at the third stage of the fourth grade of elemental energy, right? If his cultivation is far superior to Fantian's, doesn't that mean he's at the fifth stage of elemental energy? There are very few Taoist cultivators of this level in the 3 continents. This is not something this old monk knows. Guzhan shook his head slightly. His words surprised Xiaohua. This old monk only came to warn Fantian. Since he's no longer here, this old monk will investigate this place clearly. I only need to return to the temple and report. That person's strength should be much stronger than this old monk. How can this old monk offend him? Chapter 34:14. The more Xiaohua thought about it, the more the drawbacks of several cultivation methods began to show. Now it was merely a conflict of ideas. Perhaps in the end the conflict between Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, demon, devil, and soul would become even more severe. Perhaps Xiaohua's primordial spirits, which came from the same source, would even fight against each other. Seeing the confusion in Xiaohua's eyes, Xia Hui was delighted and said with a smile. Now when Tanyu came here, he first showed confusion, then thought about Tanyu's calmness along the way. This little monk knows that this must be the place Tanyu was looking for. But as for why Tanyu hesitated to send out the communication magic tool, even if this little monk didn't ask, Buddha would have told this little monk through Tanyu, right? Rather than spend this little monk's energy searching, it's better to listen to Tanyu's explanation here. Go with the flow. That's right, it's exactly like that. Xia Hui's words made Xiaohua's eyes light up. He couldn't help but ponder. Some things, when you don't have the power to pursue them, you can only go with the flow. Only by following the development of things can you find the root of the matter. And regardless of whether it's Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, demon, devil, or soul cultivation methods, they are all a kind of appearance. Only by finding the root of cultivation can I have the power to solve my own problem, right? Since he thought of this, Xiaohua's mind became active again. He looked around and said with a smile, Senior Martial Brother Xia Hui, you're right. This place must be the place where fellow Taoist Xian is looking for an old acquaintance. If I'm not wrong, it should be because of the great change in the scenery. Except for the 4 mountain ridges, fellow Taoist Xian doesn't dare to recognize the other places. This is why fellow Taoist Xian is hesitating now. Seeing the 2 little monks singing the same tune, Xian laughed inwardly. In fact, this kind of situation could be imagined with just a little thought. These 2 people actually said such profound words. It was said that all Buddhist disciples were eloquent. Just look at these 2 little monks in front of her and you'll know. However, Xian only smiled and said, Fellow Taoists are right. The Taoist cultivator living in seclusion here is called heaven flipping. Although he's only a Taoist nascent soul cultivator, with the help of his life-bound magic tool, he can reach the 5th level of origin energy realm. That's why others call him heaven-flipping venerable. In addition to being a Taoist, this cultivator is also proficient in our Confucian cultivation method. I met this person by chance 100 years ago, and then we met several more times. I knew that this person was wholeheartedly focused on Tao, and only wanted to cultivate. He did not want to show off and was not interested in the battle between the Taoist sect and the Buddhist sect. Not only did he not contact other Taoist cultivators, he had not even taken in a disciple. Therefore, I exchanged contact methods with him. He could be considered an old friend. This place is called the Four Extremes Mountains. I've been here several times before. In addition to having an extremely powerful natal magic treasure, Master Heaven Flipping Master is also proficient in Taoist magic circles. The Four Extremes Mountain itself is a large magic circle that Master Heaven Flipping Master has been operating for hundreds of years. When I visited Master Heaven Flipping Master before, I saw him demonstrate it. It's really magnificent inside, and it's not comparable to ordinary Taoist cultivators. As Xian spoke, she pointed at the four mountains. Now, apart from the four extreme mountains, which are the four formation cores, all traces of the formation are gone. Even the scenery of the four extreme mountains has completely changed. If this isn't an extremely brilliant Taoist formation, then a huge change has occurred in the four extreme mountains. Master Heaven Flipping Master is already no longer in the four extreme mountains. This place is definitely not a Taoist illusory formation. After Xian finished speaking, Xi Hui spoke up. This little monk has already used Buddhist perception to examine this place. These mountains and rivers are all real, and there isn't a trace of illusion at all. Junior Brother Tipu, what do you think? Xiao Hua seemed to be very familiar with the title of Junior Brother Tipu. He also smiled and said, "That's right. This little monk has also used Buddhist perception to examine this place. My Buddhist perception is the most observant. If there is any Buddhist formation, defensive formation, or magic circle, even if it can't be broken, it can still find a trace of a flaw. Moreover, this place is full of vitality, and there isn't a trace of pretense." Then a huge change has occurred in the four extreme mountains. It's hard to predict Master Heaven Flipping Master's life and death. A trace of gloominess flashed through Xian's eyes. She didn't know if it was because of Master Heaven Flipping Master's fate, or because she had come at a bad time. Haha, Xi Hui continued. The great change in the four extreme mountains is a man-made disaster, not a natural disaster. Although this little monk can't cultivate all 6 divine abilities, this little monk knows that the one who dealt with Master Heaven Flipping Master was a Taoist disciple. Master Heaven Flipping Master is most likely dead. Oh. Why is fellow Taoist Xi Hui so sure? Xian stared at Xi Hui and asked curiously. My Buddhist faction's disciples don't know how to use Heaven-Earth Origin Qi, and your Confucian faction's disciples don't know how to use Heaven-Earth Origin Qi. Only Taoist faction's disciples and a few demons know how to control Heaven-Earth Origin Qi. Xi Hui pointed at the rippling water below her feet and explained. There are so many water ripples here, far surpassing other places in the surrounding 1,000 miles. It must be the result of the Heaven-Earth Origin Qi wreaking havoc. Since Master Heaven Flipping Master's cultivation is only at the 4th or 5th level of Origin Qi, he definitely wouldn't be able to cause such a huge change by himself. Only 2 cultivators who can control Heaven-Earth Origin Qi together can cause this. Moreover, the strength of the cultivator who came to deal with Master Heaven Flipping Master is even higher than him. Whether it is Taoist faction's disciples or demons, they wouldn't be as merciful as my Buddhist faction's disciples, or as magnanimous as your Confucian faction's disciples. Since their method could cause such a huge disturbance, and even destroy Master Heaven Flipping Master's formation, then Master Heaven Flipping Master's life and death. It's easy to guess. AI, the person who understands me, is definitely not an old friend. This person is definitely my enemy. Hearing Xi Hui's explanation, Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The divine abilities of my Taoist faction's cultivators mostly rely on Heaven-Earth Origin Qi. The greater the divine ability, the greater the impact it has on Heaven-Earth. When the 2 cultivators fought, the 2 of us didn't suffer any injuries, but the surrounding environment was the first to be destroyed. I didn't even notice this scene, but this Buddhist Xi Hui actually saw it so clearly and explained it so incisive. Even if I don't release my divine sense, I can still determine that what Xi Hui said is true. Xiaohua felt a little awkward in his heart, but he said, "Ayo, that's not good. If Master Heaven Flipping Master falls, then wouldn't the magic tool that fellow Taoist Xian wants to borrow be lost? Then can we still go there?" AI, of course we have to go. Xian said bitterly. Without Master Heaven Flipping Master's magic tool, our chances of success will be reduced by 20%. However, there isn't much time left, So I have no choice but to. While Xian was speaking, a faint Buddhist sense swept over from the horizon and fell on the three people in the Four Extremes mountain. Oh, another Buddhist Taoist has come? Xian raised her eyebrows and looked towards the source of the Buddhist sense. Xia Hui still had that kind of smiling expression. She glanced at Xiao Hua and said, just from the Buddhist sense alone, this person should have reached the Lotus Realm, which is a level higher than this little monk and junior martial brother Tipu's Bright Lotus Realm. He should be our senior. Hearing Xia Hui expose his Buddhist cultivation realm, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel the corners of his eyes twitch. Even though this realm was already somewhat concealed by the secret technique of soul cultivation, in his heart, he finally understood why Xia Hui only thought for a moment before agreeing when he addressed Xia Hui as senior brother when he had just shaved his head and become a monk. It turned out that Xia Hui had already discovered the secret he was trying to hide from his Buddhist awareness. Xiao Hua smiled embarrassedly and bowed. Ba, senior martial brother Xia Hui really has a great divine ability to see through this little monk's strength at a glance. This little monk was still too superficial. Looking at Xia Hui again, she said with a depressed expression, this little monk's cultivation hasn't reached the Bright Lotus Realm yet. Previously, I clearly didn't mind junior martial brother Tipu's concealment, and didn't intend to expose this matter, but when it came to this matter, I couldn't help it. Fellow Taoist Xia Hui, you're the one who's superficial. Xian said with a smile. That little monk Tipu didn't call you senior when he saw you, nor was he particularly respectful when he spoke. It's very obvious that his Buddhist cultivation realm isn't much lower than yours or mine. Your Buddhist doctrine and Buddhist doctrine don't need to be too compatible. He doesn't understand Buddhist doctrine, so naturally he wants to ask you for advice. Since you know that his Buddhist doctrine isn't inferior to yours, whether it's the previous tacit agreement or the current clear indication, you don't think it's too much. But your remorse has left a mark on your Bright Lotus Realm. Ba, good indeed, good indeed. Xia Hui put her palms together and said with a smile, Xian is right. This little monk's body was speaking the truth, but I didn't know the meaning. Every time I was enlightened by you, I learned a lot. In that case, this little one doesn't need to give you any promise or reward for this trip. Xian glanced at the man and beast in the distance who were already flying closer, and said to Xia Hui with a smile. Xia Hui raised her head. Xian is right. This little monk has already learned a lot from Tanua. Even if there's no promise or reward, this little monk is still willing to go. It had to be said that Xia Hui's current situation was very similar to Xia Mei's. Both of them were proficient in Buddhist doctrine, and their Buddhist supernatural powers were also extremely high. Both of them were at a bottleneck that was difficult to break through at the same time. Furthermore, they had been stuck at this bottleneck for a very long time. It was so long that they felt irritated in their hearts. At this moment, they wanted to jump out, but they lacked an effective method to break through this bottleneck. There were also thousands of distracting thoughts in their hearts that disturbed their cultivation. The contradiction in their hearts could even be described as paranoid. He could not do this, nor could he do that. Other than reciting Buddhist scriptures, there seemed to be no other safe actions. Of course, reciting Buddhist scriptures was a slow and steady path, but Xia Hui didn't want to rely on this kind of ordinary method. Like Xia Mei, he needed to find an opportunity to break through the bottleneck from the outside world. Xia Hui didn't know much about Xian's background, but from their previous contacts, Xian's behavior was more mysterious, and his speech and behavior were also elegant. In particular, the gap between Buddhism and Confucianism didn't exist in Xian's eyes. Therefore, Xia Hui felt that Xian was an old friend who could have a deeper relationship with him. This time, Xian sent a message to Xia Hui. Xia Hui didn't hesitate and immediately came over. On the way up the mountain, not to mention Xian's many reminders, even the discussion with the little monk Tipu also benefited him a lot. This really made him feel that this trip was not in vain. Chapter 34:15. Xian hurriedly asked, Master Guzhen, are you going to return to Jianglu Temple? Haha, I don't think I need to tell you where I'm going, do I? What Xian said to Guzhen earlier. Guzhen returned the same words. However, Xian was not surprised. With a smile on her lips, she replied, if I have a chance to let Master Guzhen get rid of the drawback of not being able to bring karma into samsara, I wonder if Master Guzhen is willing to take it. What do you mean, benefactress? Guzhen wasn't as ecstatic as Xian thought. Instead, he frowned and the monk robe on his tall figure trembled slightly. This trembling wasn't due to excitement, but a kind of alertness. Even Xiai Hui was puzzled by Xian's words. He said, Xian Tanue, being a Buddhist guardian is a kind of sacrifice. Grandmaster Guzhen and the others often have no choice but to kill demons and protect Buddha. Tanue, you don't need to use this to provoke Grandmaster Guzhen's Buddhist heart. Before Xiai Hui finished speaking, Xian pursed her lips and smiled. Fellow immortal Xiai Hui, do you think I'm joking with Master Guzhen? Do you think I don't know some secrets of Buddhism? Little girl, Guzhen said coldly. Just say what you want to say. Why beat around the bush? I've long offered my body to Buddhism, and the Buddha fruit to the Buddha Lord. I'm no longer interested in the secret arts of breaking away from being a guardian and condensing karma. I don't know how many secret arts your Buddhism sect has, Xian said faintly. But I know a place where there might be ancient Buddha rainbow. Ancient Buddha rainbow? How is that possible? When Xian finished speaking, Guzhen was dumbfounded. He cried out in disbelief. How can there be an ancient Buddha in the Pure Land world? With that, Guzhen's tall figure trembled involuntarily. His previous alertness had long disappeared, and was replaced by excitement from the bottom of his heart. What's ancient Buddha rainbow? Seeing Guzhen so nervous and excited, Xiai Huiyin naturally knew that this thing was really useful to Guzhen. However, he had never heard of ancient Buddha color. The ancient Buddha luster is a 7-colored relic condensed by the reincarnation of the ancient Buddha Lord. This relic contains the supreme willpower of the Buddha Lord. However, because the negative karma in it was not pure, it was abandoned when the Buddha Lord reincarnated. Xian glanced at the speechless Guzhen and explained, the Buddha Lord's karma is so powerful. Who can resist the Buddha Lord's karma? Therefore, no one dared to use this 7-colored relic. However, after the 7-colored Sarira was placed between heaven and earth for 100,000 or even millions of years, the karma in it would be tempered by the mind power of the Pure Land. In the end, only the mind power of the Buddha Lord in the Sarira would be left. Although it was only a wisp or half a wisp, it was powerful enough to allow a bodhisattva to attain fruition. If Master Guzhen condensed this thing, the half-wisp of mind power would be enough for him to condense a protective relic and protect the relic's negative karma during his reincarnation, ensuring that he would not lose his mind. Such a thing. Why didn't Xian Tanue mention it before? Xiai Hui was shocked and asked without hesitation. Xian smiled and shook her head. It's not that I didn't want to explain it to you, fellow immortal. It's just that you and I are not strong enough to come into contact with this thing. If I said it, it would only make you greedy, and it would even be detrimental to your cultivation. Today, I met Master Guzhen, and I have a request for you. With your strength, you should be able to give it a try. Naturally, I had to explain it to you. I see. Xiai Hui nodded slightly, obviously trusting Xian. I understand now. Then Xiai Hui turned to Guzhen. Under the moonlight, Guzhen's tall figure had stabilized. She said, Grandmaster, does what Xian Tanue said make sense? That's right. Guzhen's eyes flickered under the moonlight. He said, although the path of being a Buddhist Dharma protector isn't smooth, Buddha is merciful and leaves many chances for survival. This ancient Buddha relic is the safest, but it's also the most difficult. Not to mention that the sons of Buddhas who can ascend wouldn't have too many relics left behind. Even if they did, there wouldn't be many. The Pure Land is so vast, and there are so many sons of Buddhas. Anyone who can obtain it is a great opportunity. This old monk never thought there would be an ancient Buddha relic left in this world. At this point, Guzhen stared at Xian and asked coldly, May I know how I can be of service to you, benefactress? And how could benefactress possibly know the whereabouts of such a supreme treasure of the Buddhist sect? Xian looked up at Gu Zhen's monk robe. His hands hidden under the robe seemed to have formed a Buddhist seal. She smiled faintly and reached out to take a hairpin from her hair. She flung her hand, and the hairpin streaked across the air with a golden light before landing in front of Gu Zhen. Grandmaster, you'll know when you see it. But don't reveal my origin. Oh. Gu Zhen frowned. He stretched out his hand, which was as thick as a dragon's claw, and grabbed the hairpin. When he glanced at the hairpin, he was surprised. He looked at the hairpin several times and then at Xian. Finally, he waved his hand and returned the hairpin to Xian. He said, I understand. Since you have such a background, it's no big deal for you to know this secret. Xian took the hairpin and looked at Xi Hui with a smile. Xi Hui immediately waved her hand and said, Xian Tanua, there's no need for this little monk to see it. This little monk befriended a mortal friend not because of a mortal friend's origin. If this little monk knew about it, there would be a dispute in my words. This little monk doesn't want to speak without thinking. That's right. Xian stretched out her hand and inserted the golden hairpin into her hair, not giving Xiaohua the opportunity to examine it. Damn it, is there a need for this? Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. This Xiao has seen Morong Songyin from a first-class family and Princess Baihua from Chanu country. Even if you're the daughter of a first-class family, what can you do? This Xiao doesn't even have the mood to tease you. I've sinned. This little monk is Di Pu, not Xiaohua from the Dao sect. How can you talk about teasing me? What does New Tanua want this old monk to do? Gu Zhen's tone was somewhat cautious. The female benefactor also changed to New Tanua. It's like this. Xian said concisely. This one invites immortal friend Xi Hui to go to an ancient ruin. That's where the immortals and Buddhas joined hands to kill the Dao sect. As far as this one knows, there's an immortal artifact left behind in the Pure Land world. Immortal artifact? Gu Zhen was dumbfounded again. He immediately looked up at the full moon in the sky. He almost suspected that he was dreaming. First, there was the ancient Buddha celestial artifact, and now there was an immortal artifact. This was something he had never dreamt of. Yes, it's an immortal artifact. Xian said with a smile. If it's not an immortal artifact, how could there be the ancient Buddha celestial artifact? But Gu Zhen originally wanted to ask how Xian knew, but thinking of the golden hairpin he saw just now, he felt somewhat relieved. If it's not that kind of origin, how could there be such a secret? This secret was left behind by the Dao sect that we joined hands to kill. Therefore, there are a lot of formations inside. Ordinary Buddhas and Confucian cultivators can't find it, let alone go in. After so many years, the location of this secret has long been forgotten. If this one hadn't looked up an old matter recently, no matter what, I wouldn't have thought that there was such an immortal artifact in the Pure Land world. Xian said again. Since it's an immortal artifact, how can we do it? Female Tanua should ask for help from her own sect. Gu Zhen smiled bitterly. Although he coveted the ancient Buddha celestial artifact, he still knew that this place was not a place where he could escape unscathed. Xian waved her hand disapprovingly. Master, you're wrong. If this one asks for help from others, how could the immortal artifact fall into their hands? Master, don't forget that it's an immortal artifact. Which Confucian cultivator doesn't want it? Until now, this one only dares to tell fellow immortal Xi Hui and Master about this. This one doesn't dare to trust anyone else. Gu Zhen opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Xian's words. Moreover, this one has made sufficient preparations for this matter. Not only did I read the records of that place clearly, but I also memorized all the formations inside. I also have a well-thought-out plan to break all the formations. As a matter of fact, this one came to the Four Extremes Mountain to borrow a Dao sect magic treasure from Master Heaven Flipping Master to break one of the formations. Of course, since Master Heaven Flipping Master has fallen, you should be able to use his Buddhist alms bowl as well. Oh, so that's how it is. Gu Zhen finally understood. Female Tanua wants to break the Dao sect's water-based formation. Exactly. Xian clapped her hands and smiled. You're right, Master. If you're not in a hurry to return to the Crimson Melon Temple, you can come with us. I estimate that the round trip will take around 20 days. Oh. Guzhen was surprised again. Only 20 days? How could there be such a forbidden area near the Four Extremes Mountain? This one has already spoken so frankly. Master, there's no need to force this one any further, right? Xian said with a smile. Guzhen's face flushed red, and he smiled embarrassedly. He put his palms together and said, Ba, female Tanua has indeed given this old monk a difficult problem. Since it's an opportunity, it won't be easy. Xian smiled. If it's so easy to obtain, how could it be called an opportunity? In any case, this one has already explained the reason for this matter. It's up to Master to decide whether to go or not. Xiahui Guzhen thought for a moment, then suddenly asked the little monk, Xiahui. Xiahui was clearly taken aback, but he hastily nodded and said, This little monk is here. Do you have any instructions for me, martial ancestor? Do you know where that secret is? Guzhen asked. Chapter 34:16. Xiahui glanced at Xian and said with a smile, Xian Tanua didn't tell me the details, but I know the general location. It'll definitely take less than 20 days. Since that's the case, I'll go with Xian Tanua. Hearing that, Guzhen made a decision. I just need to return to Jiangli Temple within a month. Good, Xian clapped and said. With an expert like Master Guzhen, I'll have more confidence. Guzhen waved his hand. I have some useless Buddhist abilities, so I don't dare to hope for any immortal tools. I only hope to obtain the ancient Budokai Li under New Tanua's guidance. Oh, in addition to that, I don't need anything in the forbidden area. I won't ask about the specific distribution. Ba, thank you for your help, Grandmaster. Xiahui knew these words were meant for him, so he didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly thanked him. Since you've decided, we'd better hurry over. Xian urged. We'll try our best to leave more time for you. Benefactor Xian Xiaohua said with a wry smile. Now that things have come to this, you should tell me where you're going, right? Of course. Xian said with a smile. I'm not afraid to tell you that it's Saint River. Even if you know it's Saint River, without my guidance, you won't be able to find the forbidden area. Saint River? Xiaohua was stunned, and so was Guzhen. The two of them said almost at the same time. The Saint River of the 3 rivers and 4 seas? Xiaohua blinked his eyes. He had said this sentence, but there was one sentence he did not shout out. Saint Jiang is actually in the Elysium world? Guzhen followed Xiaohua and said, Is it the Saint River that Saint River hides the Emperor's sword, and the Emperor's sword comes out to suppress the 9 provinces? This is beyond old monk's expectations. That's right, it's that Saint River, Xian said proudly. In the 3 continents, besides the Saint River of the Pure Land world, who else dares to call themselves Saint River? Alas, I go to Saint River almost every year. Why didn't I know there was such a forbidden area at the bottom of the river? Guzhen sighed. Xiahui, on the other hand, was very calm. She smiled and shook her head. Grandmaster, the Saint River crosses the Pure Land world. It is known as the origin of the 2 seas. How did you find the forbidden area in such a huge Saint River? Is the immortal artifact the Son of Heaven's sword? Xiaohua suddenly called out. Xian looked at Xiaohua, rolled her eyes, and said sarcastically, Little monk Tipu, the sage Jiangsong's Son of Heaven's sword is just a legend. Do you think the Dao sect's immortal weapon can suppress the 9 regions? If that's the case, where would the face of us Confucian cultivators go? Even without the Son of Heaven's sword. Since Saint Jiang is in the Pure Land world of the Buddhism sect, could it be that the origin of the Confucian cultivators is the Pure Land world? Not the hidden immortal continent? Xiaohua seized the opportunity and unceremoniously retorted. Oh, Xian didn't open her mouth, but Xiahui, who was next to her, was surprised. She said in surprise, If it weren't for junior brother Tipu, This little monk would never have thought about this. This Saint Jiang is clearly the name of Confucian cultivators, so why is it still called this in the Pure Land world? Even the name hasn't been changed. It's really puzzling. Speaking to this point, Xiai Hui somewhat apologetically said to Xian Tanua, don't blame this little monk for being curious. This little monk has always been engrossed in Buddhist cultivation, so I don't know much about these secular things. Suddenly hearing this today, I feel a bit strange. It's not that I'm being disrespectful to you Confucian cultivators. Xian smiled and said, fellow immortal Xiai Hui's attitude is normal. Haggling over every ounce is not good for your cultivation. As for why Saint Jiang is in the Pure Land world, and why the name of Saint Jiang is contrary to the name of the Buddhism sect, this involves a great ancient secret. This little one only vaguely heard about it. As for the specific truth, I'm afraid it has long been annihilated in time and space. If even female benefactor doesn't know, then I'm afraid not many people in this world know. Guzhen obviously had the same idea as Xiai Hui. He also didn't care about Saint Jiang or Buddha Jiang. He casually said and then looked up at the full moon and urged, since female benefactor doesn't know what that immortal tool is, it's not too late for me to wait until we reach Saint Jiang. Yes, let's hurry on our way. On the way, this little one will tell the two fellow immortals what I know, so that we can carefully plan and avoid any mistakes. Xian naturally echoed. She waved her hand, and the somewhat lazy strange bird in the distance immediately shook its black and white feathers and flew over. Strange, since the Son of Heaven's sword is so powerful and is said to be able to shake the 9 regions, why is it not ranked in the top 10 imperial tools? Xiao Hua's curiosity was greatly aroused. He followed behind Xian and asked, since there is a saying that Saint Jiang hid the Son of Heaven's sword, then is the Son of Heaven's sword in Saint Jiang now? If it's not there, then where is the Son of Heaven's sword? Oh, the Son of Heaven's sword. The Son of Heaven is the Son of Heaven. In this world, who can wield the Son of Heaven's sword? Xiao Hua's question was even more powerful than the Buddhist sect's secret incantation. Hearing it, Xian covered her face and ran away. She jumped on the strange bird and soared into the sky, escaping without a trace. Ai, this is an impatient little girl. Xiao Hua very regretfully stood in the air and shrugged his shoulders. This scholarly family's upbringing is indeed a bit lacking. Don't they know that not answering other people's questions is impolite? Junior brother Tipu the Azure Lion flew to Xiao Hua's side. Xiai Hui sat upright on top of it and said with a smile, previously junior brother mentioned Virokana? This little monk just happened to have some understanding, so I'll discuss it with junior brother now. Haha, very good. Xiao Hua laughed loudly. His figure flew up and landed on the Azure Lion's back. He sat down cross-legged. The Azure Lion raised its head and roared. Blue clouds appeared under its feet, and it chased after the purple fur hoe that had already flown away. Xiao Hua often heard people say that when drinking with a bosom friend, 1,000 cups were too few, and when talking to a friend, half a sentence was too much. He didn't like spiritual wine very much, so he had never had 1,000 cups of wine competition with others. However, there were quite a few cultivators who didn't get along with him. However, when it came to a monk like Xiai Hui, Xiao Hua had never met him before. There was no need to talk about Li Zongbao, who didn't say a single word for a long time. There was also no need to talk about Zhang Qingxiao. Although this guy talked a lot, every word he said didn't deviate from the devil sect. He was abnormally arrogant. As for the other people, they didn't make Xiao Hua feel relaxed and free. It seemed that in front of Xiai Hui, he could talk about anything. He and Xiai Hui could debate about the Dharma for several days in a row, citing scriptures and arguments. Sometimes they argued until their faces and ears turned red, but when they talked until their mouths and tongues were dry, they would look at each other and smile. Perhaps no one could convince the other, but the two of them had gained a lot in their hearts. Xiai Hui's attainments in the Dharma were very deep, but he was also very humble. In front of Xiao Hua, he didn't have the slightest trace of arrogance. Every time Xiao Hua said something, every question he asked, he would definitely answer, and he would tell everything he knew. This made Xiao Hua's understanding of the Dharma become deeper and deeper in these 10 days. Every time Xiaohua gained something, he would be exultant and share it with Xi Hui. It was as if he was a real monk. Xiaohua was close to Xi Hui, so how could Xi Hui not admire Xiaohua? Seeing that Xiaohua's Dharma cultivation was getting deeper and deeper, the smile on the corner of his mouth also became more and more intense. He felt very gratified that he had brought Xiaohua out of the Shaolinglong Temple in the Great Snow Mountain. If such a little monk with the root of wisdom was left on a barren mountain, the Buddhist sect would have one less famous senior monk in the future. Alas, the Buddhist sect is really amazing. This Xiao really underestimated them in the past. On this day, Xiaohua and Xi Hui debated for a while, and mentioned a slightly obscure Buddhist principle. Xi Hui didn't know how to explain it for a while, so he closed his eyes and pondered. Xiaohua also temporarily rested. He raised his eyes to look at the purple-haired hoe and the strange bird flying in front of him. Then he released his Buddhist sense again to explore the situation below. He sighed endlessly in his heart. This Dharma is broad and profound, and the profoundness within it is endless. Even if there are monks who don't cultivate the Dharma, they can still benefit a lot from it. If compared to Confucian cultivators, Dharma is literature and Dharma is martial. The two can be separated from each other, but they can also complement each other. If compared to my Dao sect seems to be much weaker in this aspect. Dao sect scriptures are mostly about cultivation, about overcoming the heavens with oneself. If this Xiao didn't come to the 3 continents, how could I jump out from the bottom of a well? How could I know the mysteries of Confucian cultivators and Buddhism? Those prejudices against Buddhism from before, presumably also have to be removed. Whether it was Buddhism or Confucianism, there were those who pretended to be sanctimonious, those who pretended to be righteous, those who pretended to be benevolent, those who spoke sweet words but swords at the heart, and those who were cruel and merciless. But at the same time, there were those who were sincere, those who were warm-hearted, those who were open-minded, and those who were kind on the outside but soft-hearted. Didn't they say that the same rice could raise 100 different kinds of people? There are also 10,000 kinds of people under one cultivation sect. This is human nature, and it has nothing to do with the cultivation method. It's just that, since this Xiao is a cultivator, he must cultivate properly. Since this Xiao has the opportunity to learn from others, then he must learn from different cultivators. Learning from each other's strong points is the way of cultivation. After thinking through this, the prejudice against Buddhism in Xiaohua's heart gradually disappeared. He unconsciously relaxed, as if he had broken free from some kind of invisible shackle. Then he released his Buddhist sense and casually looked at the ground. Previously, when Xiaohua came from the snowy mountain to the Four Extremes mountain, the road was completely desolate, and it was rare to see people. Not to mention the snowy mountain, which was extremely high and covered in snow. Ordinary Buddhist children wouldn't go there. Even the Four Extremes mountain was very dangerous. If Xian didn't lead the way, Xi Hui might not have been able to find it. Therefore, what Xiaohua saw was quite similar to the Donrain continent. But not long after coming out of the Four Extremes mountain, the scenery of this paradise began to change. The climate gradually became hot, and a kind of warm and dry heat was constantly in the air. On the ground, there were also more greenery. Strange trees propped up the canopy, covering the increasingly dense mortals in the shade. Chapter 34:17. This strange tree was different from Donrain continent and hidden immortal continent. The thick tree trunk was like a pagoda in a temple, stacked up layer by layer. This tree trunk was also bare, no branches could be seen. Only when it reached the top of the tree crown did it extend several zhang-wide branches in all directions. The leaves that made up the tree crown were also interesting. They were like palm leaf fans. When the wind blew, the tree crown swayed, as if a big hand was shaking hundreds of palm leaf fans at the same time. The fruits of this strange tree also attracted Xiaohua's attention. These fruits were different from spirit fruits and spirit trees. They were not hanging on the branches, but just stuck to the top of the tree crown, raised high. Moreover, each tree only bore 9 fruits. These fruits were of different sizes. The big ones were the size of a head, and the small ones were only the size of a fist. The fruits looked very strong. The green fruit skin tightly wrapped the fruit. Even if it fell from the top of the tree, the fruit would not be torn apart. The scenery was naturally in Xiaohua's eyes, but what he paid attention to was the people in the scenery. The mortals of Elysium world were no different from hidden immortal continent, but their skin was slightly darker, and their clothes were different. Most of the men wore short clothes, while the women wore light veils that covered their skin and faces. Of course, in addition to the secular people, most of them were ordinary monks. In Elysium world, there were many temples. These temples were either big or small, and the incense burning there was exuberant. Whenever Xiaohua's Buddhist sense swept through the temples, he would see pious men and women kowtowing, offering incense and giving money. Of course, Xiaohua's Buddhist sense was often detected by the senior monks in the temples. At the beginning, Xiaohua hurriedly withdrew his Buddhist sense, fearing that it would cause a misunderstanding. But after a long time, Xiaohua found that not only did the Buddhist sense not have any hostility toward the temples, but it was also very kind. When it came into contact with his Buddhist sense, it would immediately withdraw, without any further warning. Elysium world. Is it really a Elysium world? Looking at the pious faces of the men and women, looking at the smiles on the faces of the monks, Xiaohua sighed again. Are the people of Elysium world very satisfied? Alas, in this Zhao's opinion, Buddhism is a special sect among Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism. Rather than saying it is a cultivation method, it is better to say it is a kind of faith. Although soul cultivators also emphasized on the power of faith, their believers were all natives of Meng Mountains, and their range was limited. As for the Buddhist sect, because of the doctrine of Buddhism, everyone could believe in the Lord Buddha, although the power of faith of a single person was weak, and could not be compared to the millions of natives in Meng Mountains. There were so many of them. Perhaps there were hundreds of millions of people in the entire Elysium. This level of power of faith. Holy shit, it should be enough for the Buddha Lord to become a Buddha. Or perhaps this belief was the root of happiness? Since they were all beliefs, what was the relationship between the 12 great gods of soul cultivation and the Buddha of Buddhism sect? Why does my Tao sect not have a Tao ancestor? Why doesn't our Tao sect have any faith? The more Xiaohua thought about it, the more he thought about it. He had thought about it before, but at that time, it was all doubts and doubts. Now that he saw the prosperity of the Buddhist sect, he couldn't help but think deeply. Xi Hui opened her eyes and saw that Xiaohua was also pondering with his eyes closed. She smiled and asked, "Junior brother Tipu, have you comprehended anything?" Xiaohua didn't open his eyes. He smiled and said, "This little monk was a little tired just now, so I took a short rest." Only Xiaohua himself could solve the problem of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. He didn't think that this Xi Hui, who only knew about Buddhism, could help him in any way. Look into the distance. We have arrived at the Saint River. Xi Hui didn't think it was a big deal. She pointed her finger into the distance and said with a smile, "Oh, so fast." Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He opened his eyes and looked into the distance. Sure enough, he saw a stretch of green water spreading between the heaven and earth. One end of the green water was connected to the mountain range and the green shade, while the other end was connected to the boundless sky. The green water in the distance was so close to the color of the sky that it was impossible to distinguish the boundary. It was as if the green water was the falling of the Milky Way. Looking at the green water again, there were white sails smaller than a handkerchief. Under the white sails, there were doll-like boats that didn't move for a long time. Xiaohua understood that it wasn't that these boats didn't move, but rather that they were drifting like the big boats nearby. It was just that they were too far away from here. The distance that the big boats drifted over was too small in his eyes. Is this the South Sea or the Saint River? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Wasn't this river too wide? Nonsense, where is the South Sea? This can only be the Saint River. Xi Hui lightly reprimanded Xiaohua and said, "This Saint River is known as the origin of the two seas. Not only is it vast and magnificent, it crosses the Pure Land world, and has thousands of tributaries that converge into it. Wherever the river reaches, there are hundreds of millions of Buddhists. I don't know how many Buddhists rely on the Saint River to survive." What is that? While speaking, Xiao Hua frowned and pointed his finger in a direction. Oh. Xiai Hui didn't understand and followed Xiao Hua's finger. She saw that it was a river bay that was several li in size. The Saint River's water flowed slowly, circling and flowing between two hills. The hills were several li in size, forming a very calm river bay. The two hills were ordinary and not very tall. However, on the hills, there were two Buddha statues that were several zhang in size. Therefore, this river bay was different. At this time, on top of the hills, there were many men and women who climbed up with difficulty and piously prostrated themselves in front of the Buddha statues. Below the hills, the river bay was abnormally lively. What Xiao Hua said was a group of more than 10 people. Everyone in this group was wearing plain clothes. There were also some women with white flowers on their temples. In front of the group, there were several people carrying something that looked like a flower basket. However, in the flower basket, there were not only flowers, but also an old man who was lying naked in the flowers. The old man's hands were crossed in front of his chest. His eyes were tightly closed and his face revealed a kind of serene smile. This group of people walked to an empty spot at the side of Riverbend, and slowly came to a stop. The few people at the front put down the flower baskets, and the 10 people at the back rushed forward. The woman plucked the white flowers from her temples, and threw them into the flower baskets. Then everyone worked together to lift the flower baskets and sent them into Riverbend. Although the river water in the river bay was gentle, it was still flowing. After the flower basket entered the river bay, it immediately floated into the river bay along with the river water. The flower basket was originally made of rattan. Just as it floated out several zhang, the river water immediately rushed in. The river water increased and gradually lifted the old man's body. Then the flower basket gradually sank. At the side of the river bay, the more than 10 men and women had smiles on their faces. Although there were some women with sparkling and translucent tears at the corners of their eyes, they still chanted the Buddhist scriptures in an abnormally pious manner. Following everyone's gaze, the flower basket sank to the bottom of the river bay. The old man's body was indeed half sinking and half floating, moving along with the river flow. It was very obvious that this was the old man's funeral. These more than 10 men and women should be the old man's children and relatives. If it was just this, Xiao Hua might not be surprised. Whether it was the cremation of the old monk from the exquisite temple, or the burial of the ordinary cultivators from the Xiaoyu continent, Xiao Hua had seen them all. This water burial was not considered rare. However, this river bay was more than 10 li in size. Not only were there many people at the side of the river bay, there were also many people inside the river bay. Of the people inside the river bay, some were taking a bath, some were immersing themselves in the water devoutly. Of course, there were also some people who were floating on the water just like that. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. The people outside the river bay, some were kneeling by the side of the river, kowtowing to the ground. It was unknown what their mouths were muttering. Some were prostrating themselves on the water, devoutly cupping the river water with their hands and drinking it in big mouthfuls. There were also some people who were holding a few boxes in their hands, splashing something into the river water. If Xiao Hua was not surprised, it should be the embers of the corpse after the fire. When the old man's corpse slid into the river water, there were still a few people who were wildly drinking the river water. These people only slightly moved to the side. Then, they simply ignored the old man, and continued to pour the river water into their mouths. As for the old man's corpse floating by, the people in the river water turned a blind eye to it. They simply did not care. The people in the river water did not pay attention to the old man's corpse. However, the fish in the water and the birds in the sky did. Not long after the old man's corpse floated into the river bay, fat river fish swam over and surrounded the naked corpse in the water. On the river surface, several birds also flew down, either eating the river fish or swallowing the corpse. As for the old man's son on the riverbank, not only did he not anxiously chase away the birds and fish, his face was instead filled with joy. These people, aren't they too crazy? Xiao Hua looked at the inconceivable actions of the various people in the river bay, and unconsciously became dumbstruck. He whispered. Ba Xiai Hui, however, acted as if this was a common occurrence. She chanted Buddha's name and laughed. What's so strange about this? Junior brother Tipu is a bit obsessed. Junior brother Tipu, don't you know? Although this Saint River has the title of a Confucian saint, our Buddhist sect has never planned to change its name. However, this great river that runs through the Pure Land world already has no name in the hearts of billions of Buddhist people. Whether it is called Saint River or Buddha River, in the hearts of Buddhist people, it is only a Buddha river. It is a river that is unique in the hearts of billions of Buddhist people. It is a river that is filled with the blessings of Buddha, a river that carries the past life, present life and future life of Buddhist people. Looking at Xiaohua's slightly frowning appearance, Xi Hui excitedly said, Junior brother Tipu, seeing this scene, could it be that you are not happy? Could it be that you don't feel that this is the eternal state of Buddha's light in our Pure Land world? Do you know that this great river is connected to the land of bliss in the hearts of Buddhist people? The origin of this river is the exit of the land of bliss. The destination of this river is the entrance of the land of bliss. Look at that newborn baby boy. After he was washed in this river, he received the blessings of Buddha. As for that old man who just passed away, he washed the dust of his life here. His dirty and smelly skin was left in the river. His clean soul flowed into the land of bliss along with the river. Chapter 34:18. This Xiaohua bitterly smiled and slightly shook his head. Isn't Saint River the source of the two seas? When did it connect to the land of bliss? That's the truth. Xi Hui vigorously nodded and pointed at the distant white sails on the river. This is something that cultivators like us can know. However, how many of these Buddhists can walk along this Saint River? Even those fishing boats on the river have never gone from the West Sea to the East Sea, right? How do they know where this Saint River came from, and where it went? Even if they have never seen it and never went there, they might not have never heard of it, right? Xiaohua continued to argue. They naturally have heard of it, and they even know that this river is called Saint River. Just like what Junior Brother said before, this saint is a special name for Confucian cultivators. It has nothing to do with my Buddhist sect. But do they believe it? Will they even listen? Xi Hui smiled. Not to mention that there are hundreds and thousands of such legends. They are devout Buddhists of my Pure Land world. Their hearts have long been illuminated by my Buddha's light. They will not tolerate other filth. Hundreds and thousands of legends. They only believe my Buddha's words. Ba, this little monk understands. Xiaohua slightly sighed. He already understood the trick. Previously he was still thinking about the benefits of faith. Now he saw the drawbacks of faith. To believe and be true is to be devout, but to believe and be foolish is to be evil. But who is devout and who is evil? How can Buddhists know? They can't jump out of the well. They can't distinguish the direction of the river. Only cultivators like Xiaohua who can jump out of the well can clearly see the direction of the river. However, thinking about the great formation at the bottom of the West Sea and the vast border of the three continents, Xiaohua shuddered. He really doesn't know how deep this well is. While speaking, the azure lion has already flown over this river bend. At the place where the river bend enters the river, the old man's corpse that Xiaohua just saw once again emerged a few times and slowly sank into the depths of the river. At the place where the corpse sank, a few small whirlpools appeared. These whirlpools also disappeared in a flash. Looking at the place where the whirlpools disappeared, from time to time, a few white bones emerged from the river. It seems to be the corpses that were previously buried in the water. How dirty is this river? Xiaohua looked. He was too lazy to talk to the excited Xi Hui. His heart felt a chill. Fortunately, as the azure lion flew into the heart of the river, the water became increasingly green. The things that could be seen at the river's edge also disappeared. Some fish that were unwilling to be left out also rejoiced. Flocks of birds also flew from the side to join in the fun. It made Xiaohua's somewhat gloomy heart. Xian didn't pay attention to Xiaohua and Xi Hui. She rode the strange bird and flew in front of Guzhen. The two of them kept talking about something. They seemed to be discussing how to enter the danger zone. At this moment, she led the three of them straight into the heart of the river. Seeing a strangely shaped reef emerging from the river, she stopped again and looked at it. Then, she patted the strange bird's neck again, and flew towards the upper reaches of the Saint River. After flying for half a day, he finally stopped. He turned his head and looked at Xiaohua and Cai Hui who were following behind him. He faintly pointed below and said, "It's here." Here? Before Cai Hui could speak, Guzhen, who was standing next to Xian, had a strange look on his face. He seemed to be in disbelief as he said, "Is Xian Tanua wrong? This is the famous Nightmare Reef Bay of the Sage River. How could it be the location of the Dao Sect's array formation? What's impossible?" Xian smiled and said, "Taoism's array formations are unpredictable to begin with. Moreover, this is a forbidden area passed down from ancient times." "That's right. I'm not denying Taoism's formation, nor am I doubting Tanyu's discovery. I just feel that countless Buddhist seniors have come here to explore for thousands of years. How could they not find any clues?" Guzhen seemed to have lost his composure at this moment. His expression became even more anxious as he hurriedly asked. When Xiaohua heard the two's words, he glanced at Cai Hui's frown and lowered his head to look at the river. He saw that the river's surface was completely different from before. The other parts of the river were completely calm. Even if there were some surging waves, they were ordinary waves. After the waves passed, the river's surface was completely flat. The river had a circumference of a few miles, and was filled with whirlpools of different sizes. These whirlpools were letting out strange moaning noises, and gusts of strong wind were blowing in and out of the river, wreaking havoc in this area. Also, these whirlpools looked disorderly, but there was a dark gray shadow between 2 or 3 whirlpools. This shadow couldn't be dispelled even under the scorching sun. Xiaohua didn't dare to release his spiritual sense. The chaotic wind around his nose already told him that the world's spiritual energy here was extremely chaotic. It wasn't the kind of order that was commonly seen in Taoism's array formations. Xiaohua glanced at the strangeness of the river, and asked Cai Hui in a low voice, "Is there a saying in Nightmare Reef Bay?" Cai Hui also shifted her gaze away from the river, and said with a bitter smile, "It's not just a saying. It's simply a notorious name. This body of water is extremely strange. If a feather falls on it, even if it doesn't get sucked into a whirlpool, it won't float on the river's surface. All the boats that pass through here, regardless of whether they belong to ordinary Buddhists or Buddhist sect disciples, are not spared. They all sink into the water and turn into wood chips. The entire process is like a nightmare, so it's called Nightmare Reef Bay by the people nearby. The reason why it's called Nightmare Reef Bay is because there were previously people who believed that there were a large number of reefs under the river that caused such a strange scene. Those boats also sank after touching the reefs. However, after the investigations of my Buddhist sect seniors, there isn't a single reefs under this body of water. Apart from the fact that there aren't any fish or ordinary marine life, there isn't anything different here. There are even many seniors who used Heaven's eyes to investigate, but apart from the river, they found nothing. As time passed, no more ships passed by this place, and no more Arhat came here to investigate. This place became a stretch of stagnant water. It's like a nightmare that no one likes. That's not all. Cai Hui turned her head at this moment and said rather viciously, "This area of several dozen miles is very strange. At specific times, it will produce an illusion. The illusion's range is extremely large, more than 100 miles. Not only will the passing boats fall into it, the mortals on the boats will also lose their senses and enter a nightmare. When they come out of the illusion, they will either go crazy, be happy, be sad, or become demented, and so on and so forth. Even my Buddhist sect disciples are not spared. Of course, these people can be considered lucky to be able to escape from the illusion. When this old monk was young, I had a junior brother who was ordered by his master to go somewhere else. He occasionally passed by the Nightmare Reef Bay and accidentally encountered the illusion. He disappeared without a trace, and to this day, it's unknown whether he's alive or dead. My Crimson Reed Temple sent out disciples to search for several days, but they didn't find any clues. This old monk was also part of the search that day, and even used my Buddhist awareness to explore the borders of this body of water. This old monk still clearly remembers the apprehension and uneasiness in my heart at that time. afraid that this body of water would suddenly unleash its power and suck me in. At this point, Xiai Hui lowered her head and looked at the mouth-like vortexes below her. She sighed and said, "Since that day, old monk has never come here again. I haven't even come within 100 miles of this place. If not for New Tanua bringing me here today, this old monk definitely wouldn't have come." "So that's how it is." Xian nodded slightly. No wonder Great Master reminded this one earlier. This one didn't expect there to be such an old story. Amitba. If it's as New Tanua said, this place is an extremely hidden ancient formation. New Tanua can take out the immortal weapon inside and destroy this formation to avenge my junior brother. Even if this old monk can't obtain the ancient Buddhist Kylie, this old monk is still willing. Guzhan said somewhat sadly. Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and she smiled apologetically. Great Master thinks too highly of this little girl. This formation was left behind from ancient times. Even an immortal weapon is not the formation eye of the formation. Even if this one is lucky enough to obtain an immortal weapon, it's impossible to destroy this formation. If it's possible, we can find the corpse of the junior brother that Great Master mentioned. It's already good enough. Hearing this, Guzhan's body trembled slightly. He actually took a long breath, and then said with a wry smile, "Corpse? So many years have passed. How can we still find a corpse? Even if there are, how many corpses have been piled up since ancient times? How can we still distinguish them?" "Grand Master?" Guzhan's reaction was very strange. Not only did Xiaohua and Xian see the abnormality, but Xiai Hui was also somewhat puzzled. She asked in a low voice, "Is there something wrong with you?" "Haha, it's nothing." Guzhan grinned. This old monk just has a slight feeling and thought of the past. Then Guzhan urged again, "New Tanua, how do we enter this ancient formation?" "Great Master, don't worry," Xian said with a smile. "This little girl naturally has a way to enter the formation. It's just that it takes time to enter this formation, so we'll have to wait here for a while." Guzhan raised his thick white eyebrows and asked in a low voice, "Could it be that we have to wait for that illusion to appear?" Xiaohua's heart also thumped, seeming to understand something. Fortunately, Xian hurriedly explained, "Great Master, this little girl doesn't know whether the illusion of the Nightmare Reef Rock is related to the formation, but according to the records, entering the formation doesn't need to go through any illusion formation, but we still have to wait until dusk or sunset." "Sunset?" Hearing this, Xiaohua and the other two involuntarily raised their heads. However, at this moment, the sky was covered with dark clouds. How could they see the sun? When the three people's puzzled gazes fell on Xian's face, she clapped her hands and took out an ink cloud pupil. She said with a wry smile, "The situation inside is all in this ink cloud pupil, but there are some origin formation restrictions inside that others can't see." Chapter 34:19. It doesn't matter. Guzhan waved his hand and said, "Since this old monk knows your identity and has accompanied you to this place, we must enter this formation. Since others can't see Mo Yuntong, this old monk naturally can't see it either, so there's no need for me to look. Everything inside will be done according to Nutanyu's instructions." "What about fellow immortal Xiai Hui?" Xian smiled and looked at Xiai Hui. Xiai Hui shrugged and answered very seriously, "Nutanyu has held on to this Mo Yuntong for a long time, right? She seems to have never wanted this little monk to look at it. Since that's the case, why should this little monk look at it?" Xiaohua found Xiai Hui's shrugging action very familiar. "Isn't this what I often do? I don't know when monk Xiai Hui secretly learned it from me." However, Xiaohua just looked and didn't say anything. He blinked his eyes and looked at the water below him. In his opinion, Xian must be treating him as nothing like before. Little monk Tipu, unexpectedly, Xian raised her hand and held the Mo Yuntong in front of Xiaohua's eyes. She smiled and said, "Do you want to take a look?" "Me?" Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He looked at Xian in disbelief and said, "Benefactress still remembers this little monk. This little monk thought you wouldn't ask about it like before." "How could that be?" Everything before didn't involve entering the formation. Now that we're going to work together to enter the forbidden area, how can this one not ask for your opinion? Xian said seriously. Although the result is the same as not being able to see it, this one still has to ask. My little monk master wants to take a look. From what benefactress said, Buddhist awareness can't see through this Mo Yuntong. Xiaohua said with a smile. Xian frowned and said, that's right. This one already said it before. What if this little monk can see it? Xiaohua stretched out his hand, and was about to grab the Mo Yuntong in Xian's hand. Just as Xiaohua expected, Xian didn't withdraw her hand, and even stretched it forward a bit. She smiled and said, it's best if this little monk can see it, so that I won't have to say anything in the future, and fellow immortal CI we can rest assured. Xiaohua withdrew his hand as soon as he touched Mo Yuntong. He looked at Xian's dark and rough face and said with a smile, since Buddhist awareness can't see it, why should I? Even senior brother CI Hui is at ease with you, so why can't this little monk be at ease? Why do I feel like this little monk doesn't trust me? Xian snorted and withdrew her hand. Ha ha ha, I've never met you before, benefactress. I've just shaved my head and entered Buddhism, but you've already tricked me into leaving the mountain. Who knows what you're up to? Xiaohua placed his hands behind his back and laughed loudly. Now that we're about to enter the ancient array formation, what's wrong with this little monk asking a few more questions and probing a few more times? Don't tell me that I, the Arhat of Buddhism, am someone who can be easily fooled? Cough cough. Without waiting for Xian to say anything, CI Hui coughed twice and said in a low voice, Junior brother Tipu, pay attention to your image. You are now a disciple of my Buddhist school. Speaking nonsense will damage your merit. Cough cough. Hearing CI Hui's reminder, Xiaohua couldn't help but cough. This was going deep into the ancient array formation. Their lives could be in danger at any time. According to Xiaohua's knowledge, CI Hui didn't seem to know Xian's origin and background. They were just friends. How could CI Hui trust Xian so much? She didn't even ask about the situation inside the array formation, and wanted to follow her in? If she was used as a cover or something, wouldn't her death be in vain? His probing like this didn't seem to be excessive, right? Could it be that this Buddhist disciple's behavior and sitting posture were more important than her life? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He looked at CI Hui and then at Xian and said, there's still some time before dusk. If benefactress Xian has the heart, you might as well tell this little monk and others the details of this ancient array formation in Mo Yuntong. Although I'll listen to benefactress's arrangements, if we listen to her in advance, we'll at least know what to do, right? Or we can also give benefactress some suggestions. Hearing this, Xian nodded slightly. She looked up at the sky and said, little monk, you're right. Although I've already told fellow immortal CI Hui some things, now we'd better discuss it properly. However, when Xian told him what she knew, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because according to Xian, this was indeed an ancient array formation. However, as for what kind of array formation it was and how many dangers there were, she didn't know. Of course, it was impossible for her to know what kind of ancient array it was. What she knew was how to enter the magic formation, and that there was a fairy weapon left behind by the immortal realm in the magic formation. As for why Xian was confident that she could break into the magic formation and get the fairy weapon, it was because Mo Yuntong had recorded several dangerous parts of the magic formation, and she had prepared several imperial weapons and celestial devices according to Mo Yuntong's description. Great Aunt, Xiaohua almost blurted out. You want to break into the ancient array formation and obtain the immortal tool with these things? You're too imaginative, aren't you? You think I want to? Xian clenched her teeth, her face slightly flushed. She took out Mo Yuntong again and shouted. This Mo Yuntong was originally incomplete. When I checked it, I also forcibly broke the restriction. It's already good that I know these things. If you can do it, you can see for yourself. In that case, Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Little Monk suggests that we treat this as a sightseeing tour. Little Monk will pretend that he didn't hear about this array formation. You and I will rest here for a while and look at the nearby scenery. Then we'll cup our hands and say goodbye. How about we go about our own business? Junior brother Deepu, Xiai Hui said with a smile. Could it be that you didn't want to enter this array formation before? Aren't you interested in the ancient Buddha's fortune inside? Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile. Benefactor Xian said it well. Little monk was originally here to join in the fun. If there was Master Fontian's magic tool, little monk wouldn't have come. Now that Master Guzhen is here, little monk's role as a Buddhist disciple is also gone. Little monk has never been interested in treasure hunting. Little monk came with senior brother just to listen to senior brother talk about Buddhism and enjoy it. Beside him, Guzhen looked at Xiaohua and said in all seriousness, Little monk, what you think makes sense. However, if it was another array formation, little monk might persuade Xian Tanua to stop. But this is the Nightmare Reef's array formation. Even if Xian Tanua stops now, little monk will still try it. Why? Xiai Hui wanted to persuade Xiaohua, but when she heard Guzhen's words, she couldn't help but be stunned. Could it be that the junior brother mentioned by Master Xian's face was green and red because of Xiaohua's words? She was a little angry. Now her heart was moved and she said anxiously, Could it be Master's yes? Guzhen raised his head and sighed. Looking at the gloomy clouds, a trace of tears actually flashed in the corner of his eyes. That junior brother of this old monk is this old monk's younger brother. When Xiai Hui said this, everyone's heart was heavy. Xiaohua had already felt that this junior brother might have some connection with Guzhen, but he didn't expect them to be so close. When this old monk was young, my family was poor. Before my younger brother was born, my father passed away. This old monk was only 4 years old at that time. My impression of my father was very shallow. After father passed away, mother was the only one who took care of old Na and my younger brother. Life was extremely difficult. When old Na was 10 years old, our family encountered a rare flood. Even now, old Na can still clearly remember that day when the waves reached the sky. Mother only had time to remove a door plank before the entire house was engulfed by the flood. That door plank was very small, and could only fit this old monk and my 6-year-old younger brother. My mother could only hold the corner of the door plank with her hand. Guzhen took a deep breath and said tirelessly, After drifting with the flood for more than half a day, my mother's strength was already exhausted. But this old monk was young at that time and didn't know about this. Plus, the flood had already overflowed and I had already lost my cool. When my mother told me to look after my younger brother, this old monk didn't think the worst of it and only nodded. But before her mother could finish her warning, a fist-sized beam came along with the flood and smashed her mother into the flood. This old monk was stupefied. My younger brother cried and wanted to crawl under the flood under the door plank. It was at that moment that this old monk knew that in this life, I was the only one my younger brother could rely on. This old monk seemed to have suddenly grown 10 years older. I hurriedly held my younger brother in my arms and coaxed him, saying that it was mother who went to the bottom of the river to catch fish for us. See, even Xiaohua, who was used to seeing life and death parting, felt his nose sour. Beside him, Xian's eyes were even redder. Fortunately, when the middle of the night passed, the masters of Jianglu Temple and other places had already arrived. The lucky survivors were all rescued. Because this old monk and my younger brother had no home to return to, we followed our masters to Jianglu Temple. After a few more years, this old monk and my younger brother shaved their heads and became monks at the same time. This old monk's Buddhist name was Guzhen, and my younger brother's Buddhist name was Gunyen. Gunyen was exceptionally intelligent since childhood, far surpassing this old monk by 100 times. At a young age, he cultivated into the mortal realm. Therefore, he obtained the favor of the Sutra Depository Elder, who prepared to accept him as a disciple and personally instruct him. It was on the eve of the apprenticeship ceremony that this old monk received the abbot's decree to deliver a letter to a place. This matter was originally this old monk's, but this old monk was naturally reciting Buddha's Diamond Sutra, and became lazy. When Gunyen saw this, he volunteered to go in this old monk's place. At this time, Guzhen's emotions were already somewhat out of control. who knew that once he left, he would never come back. Later, not only did the seniors of the temple search for him many times, this old monk also secretly sneaked into this place. However, they also found nothing. From then on, whenever this old monk thought of mother's entrustment, and thought of Gu Nian dying for this old monk, my heart would ache. After that, this old monk even made a vow in front of Buddha, that in this life, I would find Gu Nian's corpse and comfort my mother's spirit in heaven. For this reason, this old monk ignored my master's advice and stepped into the guardian domain. I learned the power of the Diamond Sutra, and cast the body of Buddha, eliminating evil and protecting Buddha. This is because I want to rely on my Buddhist divine ability to one day enter deep into the nightmare reef. Chapter 34:20. At this point, Guzhen looks at Xiaohua, then at Xiaohui and Xian. He says word by word, "Previously, I didn't dare to face it because I didn't have the confidence. Now that Buddha has used your hands to lure me here, how can I not take the risk and fulfill my wish?" His Xiaohua gasps and murmurs, "Ba, it can't be such a coincidence, right?" After hearing this, Xiaohui's face turns solemn. She looks at Guzhen and says, "Martial ancestor, although this little monk's Buddhist cultivation is shallow, I have some attainments in Buddhist magic. This little monk is not talented, but I'm willing to follow martial ancestor inside to explore." Xian clenches her teeth and says in a low voice, "Sad things all have similar reasons. Since we're all in the same boat, this little girl is also willing to accompany Great Master inside. Although this little girl doesn't know much about arrays." At this point, Xian suddenly realizes something. She turns to look at Xiaohua and scolds, "Little monk, how dare you make fun of me?" Seeing that Xian scolds him without waiting for him to express his determination, Xiaohua becomes furious. "Little girl, what do I have to make fun of you? If you want to go, then go. If you don't want to go, then don't go. Junior brother, pay attention to your manners. You're now a Buddhist disciple," Xiaohui hurriedly says. "Don't violate the precepts of anger and make Buddha unhappy. Who said that you have to understand the array thoroughly before entering? If Mo Yuntong explained the array clearly, then how could the immortal tool still be inside?" Xian stared at Xiaohua and said, "Just like you said, if we can explain the details of the array clearly, then we'll be going on a sightseeing tour. It's because you don't want to go in, that's why you're accusing me." Xiaohua smiles, showing his snow-white teeth. Xian's words are reasonable. As long as there's a danger zone, it's already good to have some information about it. How can you understand the situation of the danger zone in detail? The reason why Xiaohua doesn't want to go in is that he doesn't want to be a shield for others. And now, Guzhen was determined to go in. For the sake of his heart, not for the sake of his long-cherished wish. Xiaohua would definitely help such a kind person. Moreover, this was the Dao Sect's formation. Even if Xiaohua was not proficient in formations, he was still a genuine Dao Sect disciple. With him around, wouldn't the three of them have a greater chance of survival? Seeing Xiaohua smiling and not answering her question, Xian felt embarrassed. She stamped her feet in the air and said, "Little monk, are you going or not? If you're going, then let's get it over with. If you're not going, then hurry up and leave." Xiaohua faintly smiled, looked at Xiaohui and said, "Senior brother Xiaohui, do you think this little monk should go or not?" Xiaohui smiled but did not answer. She used her index finger to point at her own chest. "Cruel and unscrupulous?" Xiaohua stared blankly and asked curiously. Xiaohui's figure swayed slightly, and she managed to stand firm in midair. She said angrily, "Ask your conscience." "I do have a conscience, but I can't find my moral integrity." Xiaohua stretched and said, "When you need this little monk, tell this little monk. If you don't, then this little monk will hide behind senior brother." This little monk has a glib tongue. Why is he so similar to those pale-faced scholars of Confucian cultivation? Xian smiled. "Don't worry, with Master Guzhen here, you won't be needed. You can just follow along and watch the show." "I hope so." Xiaohua shrunk his neck. Fellow immortal Xi Hui Xian rolled her eyes at Xiao Hua and said to Xi Hui, "This one remembers that you know Buddhism's heavenly feat, and your cultivation is quite amazing." It's not amazing, but since heavenly feat is called heart's desire, this little monk can go anywhere within 1,000 feet at will, in just a blink of an eye. Xi Hui nodded without reservation. This is also one of the main reasons why this one invited fellow immortal. Xian said. The first stage of this array is the most difficult. The array will only open for a few breaths of time, and in this few breaths of time, the entire water area within a few miles will be sealed. If not for a special ability, it's impossible to enter. And as long as someone enters the array during this few breaths of time, the entrance of the array will stop. Of course, this period of time is also very short, but for us who are around the 4th grade of origin energy, it's nothing much. And this little monk understands. Xi Hui nodded. This little monk is willing to take the lead and tear open the entrance of this array. Good, Xian nodded happily, and then explained to Xi Hui in detail for a while. The two of them didn't talk behind anyone's back, and they didn't transmit their voices, so Xiao Hua heard everything clearly. Although the situation described by Xian wasn't very clear, Xiao Hua already knew that this was definitely a Dao Sex array. Xian's words weren't false, and he couldn't help but feel a bit sad. This time, this Xiao seems to have been forced to do something beyond his ability again. After Xian and Xi Hui's discussion, the three of them put away their mounts. Xian took out the ink cloud pupil and placed it on her forehead to look for a moment, then released her origin energy and searched within a few miles, and then brought the three of them to fly towards the east side of the thousands of whirlpools. Woo, just as the four of them were flying, suddenly, a loud whimpering sound rang out, and within a few miles, waves of ghostly wailing and wolf howling could be heard. Xiao Hua lowered his head to look, and the large and small whirlpools suddenly trembled rapidly. This was the source of the commotion, and the speed at which the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was absorbed increased. The hurricane formed by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth fell into the water, and when it rushed into the whirlpool, it condensed into a sound. Swoosh! Without waiting for the others to make a move, Xian stretched out her hand and took out an emerald green handkerchief from her sleeve. With a shake of her hand, she threw it into the air. Clouds and mist gushed out from the handkerchief, and after absorbing the noble qi, it turned into a cloud that covered everyone's head and immediately blocked the hurricane. Woo, woo, woo! The whimpering sound in the water rose and fell one after another, like a frightening melody. The rhythm was like a tide that rushed into everyone's ears. Amitba Xi Hui chanted Buddha's name, and his hands formed the Akala seal. The Buddha's light emitted from his body, and also covered the four of them, and that frightening melody could no longer enter. Quickly look. Xian suddenly pointed with her hand, and cheerfully called out. Following the direction that Xian pointed, a trembling tornado gradually appeared in the thousands of whirlpools along with the melody. These tornadoes gradually gathered, and when they reached a height of 100 zhang, they suddenly whistled, like a wind dragon rushing to the western horizon. That hurricane was so big, first it was dozens of li, then it was hundreds of li. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in this area was sucked into it, and it was like an unyielding wind dragon roaring as it rapidly expanded, and directly rushed into the thick clouds. Swoosh! The hurricane rushed into the clouds, and a hole of dozens of li in size appeared to be insignificant in the endless clouds. However, it was also very mysterious. From this insignificant hole in the clouds, a ray of light shot out, like an orange sort of light falling on Xiao Hua and the others, and sprinkled over the dozens of li of water around the nightmare reef. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the hole in the clouds. In the slanted horizon, there was a touch of the afterglow of the setting sun, and it was rather reluctant to part with the grayish-blue dusk. The ancient array is indeed extraordinary. Xiao Hua sighed slightly. He could also be considered a grandmaster array master, and when he saw the array open, his thoughts were different from others. If this Xiao was the one setting up the array, I really wouldn't know how to set up an array that corresponds to the time. However, when he thought of this, Xiao Hua's heart moved. Oh, perhaps this array doesn't pursue the details. It should be related to, right? It should be related to the power of the sun and moon. If this Xiao knew how to use the power of the sun, moon, and stars in an array, I think I can also set up such a mysterious array. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the ray of light that fell on the several li of water had a beautiful change. The orange ray of light first spread out on the water surface, and then it actually followed the ripples of the water and converged towards the thousands of whirlpools. When the rays of light entered the whirlpools, the entire water body let out a low roar, and the water surface gradually rose. However, it rose by more than 3 inches. The thousands of whirlpools suddenly froze, and the orange ray of light also froze, like thousands of morning stars. This freezing only lasted for an instant, and then all the whirlpools suddenly reversed, and the rays of light within the whirlpools rushed out, rapidly swaying within several li. Every ray of light formed a palm-sized light shadow in the air, and the thousands of light shadows swayed in confusion, as if they were dancing with a group of demons, and it was even more bizarre. This Xiao Hua's gaze swept over, and his eyes flashed with confusion. The space above the water body was restricted by the array, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was already thin. These flashing lights didn't cause any fluctuations, and he really didn't understand how to open the array. Fellow immortal Ci Hui, at this moment, Xion's voice was filled with excitement, and she hurriedly said, "The ancient array has restricted divine sense and has very little effect on Buddhist sense. In particular, there is no spiritual energy of heaven and earth here, and even the noble qi is a restriction, so your Buddhist divine ability is also very little affected. If you see a door appear in this light shadow, it's a door. As for what the door looks like, and where it appears according to the records, it's not fixed. Just as we've discussed before, fellow immortal can immediately use the heart intent technique to enter." Okay. Ci Hui had already released her Buddhist sense, and her eyes were also unblinkingly staring at the light shadow swaying irregularly in the sky above the water body. She didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest, and only answered casually. Seeing Ci Hui, Xion, and Guzhen all staring at the light shadow in the sky, Xiao Hua frowned, but his eyes were fixed on the whirlpools above the water. After all, he was a formation grandmaster, and he knew that the changes of light-shadow came from the whirlpools. Tracing back to the source, if he wanted to find the pattern of the changes of light-shadow, he still had to look at the whirlpools. Moreover, if the three of them were looking at the light shadow in the sky, Xiao Hua wouldn't be delayed by looking at the side alone. Chapter 34:21. After looking at it for a moment, Xiao Hua's eyes became a little dizzy. Those vortexes were spinning rapidly. Anyone who looked at them for a long time would feel dizzy. Damn it, Xiao Hua shook his head and closed his eyes, but there seemed to be more than a dozen vortexes in front of him. However, the vortexes in front of him were black and white and had already stopped spinning. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's mind lit up and he almost cried out, "Spinning?" Since the light shadow was in the vortexes, and the vortexes were spinning, then the spinning was naturally the source of the light shadow. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua raised his eyes and looked again. He saw that the more than a dozen vortexes were spinning at different levels, at different heights, and at different speeds. He couldn't see any pattern at all. Xiao Hua looked for a moment, and seemed to see something. The rotation of the more than a dozen vortexes was changing at every moment, and every change affected the light shadow in the air. However, after Xiao Hua looked for a moment, and even released his Buddhist sense to carefully observe for a while, he had no choice but to give up. After all, there were tens of thousands of vortexes. There were tens of thousands of spinning vortexes inside, and each rotation seemed to have an extremely subtle pattern. When these tens of thousands of patterns were put together, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a mess. Wanting to find a way to enter the array formation in a short time was indeed somewhat unrealistic. When Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the light shadow and the three people who were concentrating, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Alas, this Xiao is a bit of a dead end. This Xiao isn't here to set up the array, let alone to break it. I just need to find a way to enter the array. Since this Xiao knows that the light shadow is spinning, I don't need to look at the changes of the light shadow like them. However, I also don't need to find the pattern of the rotation of these vortexes. With this thought, Xiaohua closed his eyes. His Buddhist sense fell on the water like a cool breeze, and it was as if Xiaohua's heart had calmed down. Xian had been paying attention to Xiaohua. Seeing that he wasn't looking at the light shadow and was looking at the water instead, she had already frowned. Now that he saw that Xiaohua had actually closed his eyes and only released his Buddhist sense to scan the water, he was even more puzzled. A trace of vigilance appeared in his heart. He looked at the light shadow and then looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua's origin was a bit strange. Xian had also asked Ci Hui about it through voice transmission. Although Ci Hui had never seen Xiaohua use Buddhist supernatural powers, based on Xiaohua's Buddhist awareness alone, Ci Hui knew that Xiaohua's Buddhist supernatural powers might not be inferior to hers. This kind of person with an unknown origin and uncontrollable cultivation base was not a good choice to travel with them. However, Ci Hui had also sensed Xiaohua's deep roots of wisdom through the debate of Buddhist principles. He was not the kind of evil person that Xian thought he was. That was why she insisted on bringing Xiaohua along. Seeing that they were about to enter the array and Xiaohua's strange behavior, how could Xian not be vigilant? Senior brother Ci Hui, you have to be careful. After another half a cup of tea or so, there might be an abnormality. Right when Xian was vigilant, Xiaohua suddenly spoke out. Xian was shocked and anxiously asked, "You? How did you know?" Xiaohua's heart had calmed down, so he could see more. In his Buddhist sense, the thousands of whirlpools were like thousands of spinning tops, spinning crookedly. After looking at them for a while, Xiaohua understood that although these whirlpools had different shapes and sizes, as long as the rotation of the whirlpools reached a certain pattern, it would produce a special change. And the simplest part of this pattern was that it was the same. Since he knew that the rotation of the whirlpools was the same, Xiaohua only observed for a moment before he made a decision in his heart, and casually reminded Ci Hui. This little monk's intuition may not be true. Xiaohua didn't have time to explain. Moreover, he didn't know whether what he said was correct or not, so he vaguely replied. Xian slightly curled her lips. She wanted to look at the water, but she didn't dare to give up on the light shadow in the air. She simply ignored Xiaohua and focused on looking at the sky. Since he knew that the whirlpools were the same, the door to the formation could be opened. Xiaohua began to calculate where the entrance to the formation would open. Although Buddhist sense was the best at observing minute details, and was very useful in observing the whirlpools, Xiaohua also understood that the opening of the formation's entrance was definitely related to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If he wanted to know the location of the entrance, he could only use his divine sense to observe the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, or even use his transcendence vision. Of course, Xiaohua was now a little monk of the Buddhist sect, so it wasn't suitable for him to use his divine sense. If he used his transcendence vision, it would be somewhat overkill. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua released his soul sense. Sure enough, after scanning with his soul sense, Xiaohua understood that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth above the water had been confined. Looking at the thousands of whirlpools, he saw spiritual energy of different sizes. However, these spiritual energies were condensed into threads, directly coming out from the center of the whirlpools. They wantonly swayed in the air like thousands of branches, messy and disorderly. The time it took to drink half a cup of tea quickly passed. As time passed, these threads condensed from spiritual energy of heaven and earth began to move in an orderly manner, gradually moving in front of Xiaohua and the others. An irregular shape of several feet in size gradually appeared. Haha, this is the formation's entrance. Xiaohua was overjoyed. Just as he was about to open his mouth to warn them, he suddenly froze, a layer of cold sweat appearing on his back. No. How could it be so simple? If such weak soul sense could discover the formation's entrance, then wouldn't the Taoist sect's divine sense be able to discover it easily? Why would we need to look for some light portal? Hurry. Over there. Just as Xiaohua was hesitating, Guzhan's voice rang out, pointing at a place several li away from the group. Xiaohua hastily raised his head. Sure enough, over 10 zhang in the air, thousands of light shadows suddenly condensed together, slowly forming a 3-meter-wide orange-red portal. Along with Gu Zhen's voice, Ci Hui's body flashed with faint Buddhist light. She put her palms together, chanted Ba, and raised her left foot slightly. It was with this raise of her left foot that Ci Hui's figure disappeared before everyone's eyes. A wisp of Buddhist light streaked through the air, rushing toward the portal in the air. Let's go. As soon as Ci Hui's figure disappeared, Xian urged them once more. Xiaohua and the others didn't dare delay, each urging their own cloud to follow. As they flew, Xiaohua's soul sense swept out once more, only to see that the portal formed by the world's spiritual energy was gradually disappearing. In the gap that hadn't completely disappeared, there was a wisp of red light flashing through. Hurry! Hurry! Xiaohua had just retracted his soul sense when he heard Xian's urgent voice. Raising his head, he saw that several kilometers away, a door had already appeared. But just like the previous lights and shadows, the door began to crumble as soon as it appeared. After all, it was several kilometers away. Even with Xiaohua's lightning escape, there was no way he could make it in such a short amount of time. Isn't this just a test of luck? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. If we're lucky, it'll be right next to us. If we're unlucky, it'll be like today. How can we possibly get in? Without waiting for the Buddhist light to reach the portal, Xiaohua and the others had only flown a few li away. The 1-zhang-wide portal had already collapsed into 1 qi, and the orange light was about to disappear. But at this moment, the Buddhist light suddenly flourished and then disappeared. When Xiaohua and the others hurriedly looked at the portal, a faint Buddhist light flashed, and Ci Hui's figure appeared there with the Buddhist light. Damn it, this is the heavenly feat. Xiaohua was shocked. Isn't this the teleportation of the physical body? That's right, nascent soul teleportation is a divine ability of nascent soul cultivators, and only nascent soul cultivators can teleport. The physical body of a nascent soul cultivator can't teleport. But this Ci Hui's heavenly feat allowed her to instantly fly a few li away. She was even more powerful than a late nascent soul cultivator of the Dao sect. While Xiaohua was shocked, Ci Hui seemed to have received Xian's instructions. As soon as she appeared in front of the portal, she immediately rushed in. Fortunately, although the portal was only 1 qi wide, Ci Hui had the appearance of a child and her figure was also short, so it was easy for her to enter. Ci Hui's figure disappeared into the portal, and the portal immediately stopped collapsing. However, the light around the portal was still shaking with all its might, as if a shabby wooden door was trembling in the wind, and would collapse at any moment. Good. Xian almost clapped her hands. Then she urged the auspicious cloud and said, let's speed up too. This portal won't last long. In fact, there was no need for Xian to say more. When Xiaohua and Gu Zhen saw the portal in such a state, they had already urged the auspicious cloud under their feet to rush forward. The distance of several li wasn't too far, but now that they were in such a hurry, it felt like an insurmountable moat. Fortunately, Ci Hui entered the door first. Although Xiaohua didn't know that Ci Hui was inside the door's brilliance flickered and collapsed like paper several times. However, every time, it would stand up straight as if it had been reignited from the ashes, waiting for Xian to arrive first. Xian didn't stop at all. She turned her head and called out, Master Gu Zhen, I'll go in first. You can come in when you arrive. Without waiting for Gu Zhen to speak, Xian plunged into the small portal and disappeared with a flash of green energy. Xiaohua didn't fly very fast. He followed Gu Zhen. When the two arrived in front of the portal, Xiaohua looked at the small and twisted portal, then looked at Gu Zhen's tall figure and said with a wry smile, Master, how do we go in? What's so difficult about that? Gu Zhen laughed and chanted the name of Buddha. Ba as Gu Zhen's voice fell. Gu Zhen's body also flashed with a faint Buddhist light. Without any sound, Gu Zhen's figure slowly shrank. He lifted his foot and walked towards the portal. Step by step, Master Gu Zhen actually turned into a 1 qi tall human figure and walked in safely. Everyone has their own tricks. At this moment, Xiaohua also sighed with emotion at the wonders of the Buddhist sect's methods. The bones in his body made a slight sound. His figure shrank a little, and he also rushed into the portal. As Xiaohua entered, the portal finally couldn't hold on anymore. It twisted a few times and turned into pieces of inexplicable orange-red light and shadow that scattered in the air. Of course, the orange-red light and shadow didn't last for long. In a moment, the thick clouds in the sky closed and darkness enveloped the water region. The waves in the water region retreated, and the whirlpool rotated again. Whimpers like the cries of ghosts filled the dark night sky again. Chapter 34:22. Swish with a sound of water. Xiaohua's mouth and nose are suddenly flooded with ice-cold river water. It's like he's plunging into a saint river. Xiaohua wants to use the water avoidance art without hesitation. But just as the true essence in his meridians is surging, the river water in front of him instantly disappears. Not far away, Xian is holding a goose egg-sized bead in her hand. That bead is emitting a blue brilliance, blocking the river water within 100 feet. It's a water avoidance bead. Standing on the left side of Xian is Gu Zhen, whose body has transformed into the size of an ordinary person. Sitting on the right side of Xian is Xi Hui, whose face is dark red. On the contrary, Xian's gaze falls on Xiaohua. Her eyes flash with a pensive expression. She says faintly, "Little monk, I have to thank you. If not for you being able to accurately predict the formation door's appearance, we wouldn't have been able to enter this place even with immortal friend Ci Hui's heart's fulfillment art." Hee, it's nothing," Xiaohua says half-heartedly. Looking left and right at the river water outside the water avoidance bead, he says with a smile, "I only had a slight feeling, that's all. Everything is because of senior brother Ci Hui. If not for his heart's fulfillment art, how could we have entered? Senior brother Ci Hui's contribution is naturally great, but if not for your reminder, we wouldn't have been able to concentrate on finding the door in advance." Xian stares at Xiaohua and says again. At this moment, Ci Hui also opens his eyes and says with a forced smile, "Indeed, when junior brother Di Pu reminded me, I already activated my mental force and prepared myself. Junior brother's reminder is the finishing touch." Xiaohua looks Xian up and down. He says with a smile, "I've always felt that I'm a burden. Being able to lend senior brother a hand today, my heart naturally feels at ease. There's no need to mention anything about claiming credit. Little monk, just now when the door appeared, you seemed to want to say something. Could it be that you were able to foresee the appearance of the door? Could it be that you know this ancient formation?" Gu Zhen seems to have thought of something and says. Xiaohua touches his nose and says with a bitter smile, "What are you talking about, great master? This is an ancient Taoist formation. How could I know? Just now when this little monk came in, I was still puzzled. I had clearly rushed through the door, but why did it look like I had plunged headfirst into the river?" Seeing that Xiaohua didn't admit it, Xian didn't ask anymore. She only said, "Little monk, if you know anything, you can tell us. We are now one body. We must advance and retreat together. Don't hide anything." Yes, I understand." Xiaohua nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. "For this little monk's own life, this little monk will also tell you everything he knows." Xian snorted coldly, then reached out her hand and took out a jade box. She turned to Ci Hui and asked, "Fellow immortal Ci Hui, are you done resting? We don't have much time, so we need to hurry." Ci Hui slowly got up and nodded. "Xian, don't worry. I am fine now." Ci Hui, fly behind this old monk." Gu Zhen looks at the water curtain on the left. Outside the water curtain, there are some strange swimming fishes and some grayish-black seaweed. There are no bones to be seen. He doesn't know whether to be happy or sad, so he says in a deep voice, "You rashly used the relic's psychokinesis, shaking the relic's foundation. You should use more heart to nourish it. It's not good to use psychokinesis again." "Yes, thank you, martial ancestor." Ci Hui slightly nods. The Buddhist light around her body flickers. She should be following the instructions to cast the spell. New Tanua, where do we fly to next? Guzhen asks Xian again. Xian says with confidence, "Great master, don't worry. This is the bottom of the Sage River, thousands of feet deep. We are surrounded by river water, so it's hard to determine our direction. Although we have the water avoidance pearl, we can't fly at will. Once we touch the formation's restriction, we can't go forward anymore. I have a secret talisman of the Taoist gate here. It's time to use it." Ba, then I'll have to trouble New Tanua. Guzhen puts his palms together and stands to the side. As early as when Xian took out that jade box, Xiaohua already saw clearly that there was a talisman of the Taoist gate stuck on the outside of the jade box. Inside the jade flute must be the magic tool that Xian used to break the formation. Xian raises her eyes to look at Xiaohua, then spits out a mouthful of true qi on the jade box. That talisman stuck on the box immediately floats up, flashes in midair, and turns into a pile of ashes. As soon as the talisman disappears, a ball of dark green brilliance comes out of the jade box. A wave of magic power familiar to Xiaohua is transmitted along with the brilliance. Oh, what magic tool is this? It seems the magic power's fluctuation is very strange. Xiaohua doesn't dare to spread his divine sense far, only sweeping it in front of him. He is somewhat stunned as he thinks. Xian then raises her hand and opens the lid of the jade box. A 2 fingers wide and 4 fingers long flat jade flies out of the jade box. Jade talisman? A kind of surprise flashes in Xiaohua's eyes. This kind of jade talisman is rarely seen in the Donrang continent where the Taoist gate is flourishing. How can it appear in the Buddhist gate's nirvana world? What is the origin of this Xian? Is it possible that a disciple of a Confucian family can use the Taoist gate's jade talisman? Sure enough, Xian opens her mouth and spits out another ball of true qi. This true qi is different from before. When it lands in the air, it immediately takes the shape of a sword. Xian's left hand grabs the air, as if she is holding the flying sword. Then, as if she is forming a seal, that flying sword rapidly moves in midair. Go Xian lightly reprimands. The true qi condensed into a flying sword suddenly explodes. The true qi rushes into the seal that was drawn on the flying sword before. Xian pushes her hand again. That true qi hits the jade talisman in midair. Crack crack crack, a burst of chaotic sounds. That jade talisman explodes like a blossoming emerald flower. Thousands of green lights fly in all directions. Ka 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 ka. The green lights emitted the splendor of the water avoidance pearl. Once they touch the water curtain outside, the water curtain immediately changes. Some parts turn into nothingness, while other parts condense into ice. In particular, this splendor rapidly extends into the distance. A beautiful ice palace unexpectedly appears in front of Xiaohua and the others. This not to mention Xiaohua's surprise. Even Cai Hui and Guzhen, who have already discussed this beforehand, look at the ice palace that suddenly appears in disbelief. They are speechless. This is the ancient Taoist gate's ice-condensing talisman. Unexpectedly, Xian blinked her eyes mischievously, and explained in a somewhat showy manner. Mo Yuntong mentioned that the channel of this magic formation is condensed by the water-based qi of heaven and earth. It does not prevent the river water from flowing in. Even the river water in the channel may be an illusion created by the magic formation. At this point, Xian glances at Guzhen and continues to say, just by using the imperial equipment in the water avoidance pearl, we can't distinguish the true formation channel. Moreover, if we are not careful, it is very easy to fall into the formation and not be able to escape. Mo Yuntong mentioned an idea. If the river water in this channel is frozen, presumably the illusory river water will disappear, and the true channel will appear. However, this method has very high requirements for the cultivator who uses the ice sealing technique. Not only must they have enough Dharma power, but they must also control the technique to the smallest detail, and not touch the formation. Coincidentally, I have seen a Taoist gate's ice sealing talisman. This thing itself is a water-type talisman. It is of the same origin as the formation in this river. Therefore, I don't need to know any ice sealing technique, I only need to use this talisman. Even more coincidentally, Xiaohua can't help but say, Benefactress also knows how to use the Taoist Gates talisman with Confucian cultivation's true qi. Say, how can things in this world be so coincidental? It really is. Xian smiled proudly and pointed to the depths of the ice palace. It's such a coincidence. Now we only need to fly inside and not touch the walls of the passage, and we will be able to find the trace of the immortal artifact. Alas, Xian Tanua is indeed well prepared. Ci Hui sighs again. If it was someone else, even if they came in, they would have to touch the formation's restriction sooner or later. Let's go. It seems to be very big inside. My true qi has already been suppressed. Your Buddhist senses can't go very far, right? We still have a long way to go. Xian flies up first. She has already put away the water avoidance pearl, but still holds the flexible sword in her hand. Seeing Xian fly up, Guzhen glanced at Ci Hui and followed behind without saying anything. Ci Hui smiled and said to Xiaohua, "Thank you, junior brother Tip, for covering the rear for us. It's no problem. This is the safest place. This little monk can't ask for more." Xiaohua raises his hand and asks Ci Hui to fly first. The four people fly up, with Xiaohua at the back. He tries to release his Buddhist senses. Sure enough, it is extremely suppressed and can't go more than 10 feet. Moreover, the formation channels in the four walls also block his Buddhist senses, so it can't go out at all. But fortunately, Xiaohua feels that his soul sense is not suppressed too much. If it can go very far. These are bones. Not long after flying out, Xiaohua is trying to use his soul sense. In front of him, Xian calls out with some hesitation. Xiaohua looks up. On the ice channel several feet away, there is an area densely packed with hundreds and thousands of bones. These bones are already scattered. It is impossible to tell what kind of bones they are. Moreover, the size of the bones is also different. Some are half a foot long, some are several feet long. They are obviously not human bones. Alas, Amitba Guzhen's slightly sorrowful voice rises. Thank you for the reminder. This old monk has already seen it. Although this old monk is already prepared, when faced with these bones, my heart is complicated. This formation must be the skeleton of my younger brother. This formation is so miraculous. With this old monk's current cultivation, this old monk can't deal with it. How can he escape at that time? Forget it. Since this old monk can face his skeleton, this old monk can recite the rebirth mantra several times. This old monk has already fulfilled his lifelong wish. After saying that, Guzhen sits cross-legged in front of the ice wall formed by the bones. He puts his palms together and devoutly recites the rebirth mantra. Strands of elemental energy are sent into the ice wall along with Guzhen's chanting. Unfortunately, the ice wall has no reaction at all. It is like a clay ox entering the sea. Chapter 34-23. When a drop of crystal-clear tear flowed out of Guzhen's left eye, it slowly slid across his slightly rough face and condensed on his chin. Xiaohua's suspicion in his heart completely disappeared. Xiaohua really didn't dare to believe that a Buddhist disciple who practiced Dharma protector, Hanju, was a typical example. Guzhen revealed his true feelings. His so-called story of his brother's disappearance should be true. Then his purpose of entering the formation should be normal. Guzhen's chanting was gentle and sad, far from the chanting of an ordinary monk. Xian and Ci Hui also felt sad in their hearts, standing there silently. Xian didn't urge Guzhen to hurry up, but from time to time, she looked at the ice wall covered with white bones. She knew that the ice wall must be the water curtain of the formation before it was frozen. These white bones didn't rush into the Saint River, but stayed in the water curtain, so they must be imprisoned. She was afraid that Guzhen's psyche power would touch these white bones and trigger the restriction. Fortunately, after half an hour, Guzhen's voice gradually stopped, and the ice near the white bones didn't change at all. Only then did Xian let out a long breath. At the same time, Guzhen also let out a sigh of relief. After Guzhen finished chanting the rebirth mantra, he stood up and chanted Amitba 9 times in a row, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His eyes, which were full of killing intent before, also had a trace of vitality. Seeing this, Xian said with a smile. Congratulations, Master Guzhan, for untangling the knot in your heart. Thank you, Xian Tanua, for fulfilling my wish. Guzhan hurriedly tidied his monk robe, put his palms together and bowed solemnly. If I didn't meet you, I don't know when I could be free. This is Buddha's mercy, Xian said with a smile. Master, you have contributed a lot to Buddhism. Buddha saw that you were burdened by the knot in your heart, so he pointed out the supreme path for you, but it has nothing to do with me. Heavenly flowers with others, lingering fragrance in my hand. Ci Hui also said with a smile. Buddha used Tanua to help Guzhan become Grandmaster Guzhan. Tanua also has boundless merit. Haha, I don't dare, Xian replied. If Master Guzhan has nothing else to do, can we move on? Let's go, Guzhan said with a relaxed smile. I'm fine. In the future, I will listen to Tanua's instructions. Good. Xian controlled the auspicious cloud beneath her feet, and continued to lead the way. Guzhan glanced at Baigu again before following closely behind. The ice cave's passageway was similar to ordinary mountain paths, and was even more difficult to distinguish than mountain paths. After Xiaohua and the others flew forward for half an incense stick's worth of time, many forks appeared. These forks were no different in Xiaohua's eyes, and even their shapes were exactly the same. Even Xian often stopped, and took out her ink cloud eyes to carefully examine them. Finally, Xian's ink cloud pupil was no longer useful, when she saw 3 different paths in front of her. She of Guzhan's of a man, Tanua's of a man, Tanua, and her Tanua, and then Tanua. S. Sans S Tanua's Yuntong Tanyong's San. S Tanua Tain. S Tanua's Tanua was Tanua. S and S Tanus's Is SS Tong. I've made preparations in advance, but I want to see if there are any clues. It's best if we don't use the prepared means. Okay, let's see together. Tanua understood Xian's thoughts, and then she flew toward one of the paths. Tanua Xian hurriedly called. Don't go too deep, and don't touch the ice wall. I understand. Tanua entered the path with a smile. Xiaohua and Guzhan also responded, each entering a fork in the road. Xiaohua didn't know what Tanua were like, but he himself was very careful. After flying for hundreds of feet, another 4 paths appeared in front of him. Xiaohua immediately stopped flying. This was not the void, and he didn't dare to wander around. Looking at the 4 paths that looked similar, Xiaohua smiled bitterly. The person who set up the formation is really insidious. Why did he make so many paths? Damn it, if I set up a formation in the future, I'll make it more complicated than this one. After venting his anger, Xiaohua turned around and was about to fly back, but when he turned around, a huge shadow pressed down from above his head. Ooh! Xiaohua was surprised, and without hesitation, he waved his hand and held the wishful staff in his hand. However, when he took a closer look, he laughed again. He saw that outside the ice wall above his head was the water of the Sage River, and the huge monster was a huge river fish that he had never seen before. The river fish swayed its huge tail slightly, and it didn't notice Xiaohua in the formation below. Haha! Xiaohua looked at the river fish's leisurely appearance, smiled slightly, put away the wishful staff, and continued to fly back. However, after flying for a while, he began to mutter in his heart. This formation is really strange. Not to mention that it's completely arranged at the bottom of the Sage River. The passage in this formation is so close to the river water, and there's something strange about it. If I were to encounter danger and desperately break through this ice wall, wouldn't I be able to escape the formation? However, is this formation so easy to break through? Xiaohua thought as he flew, and soon saw Xian's figure. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart lit up, and he realized, Grandma, I was almost fooled again. How can I directly see the formation outside? Outside this ice wall must be an illusion of the formation, which is to lure people into the river water. Once they touch the formation, they will definitely die. Alas, thanks to Xian's frozen talisman. Right, speaking of the frozen talisman, this jade talisman is really powerful, even stronger than my fire talisman. I just don't know if the Xian family has a refining method? Little monk, when Xiaohua's heart was filled with greed. Xian raised her voice. Have you found a way out? No. Xiaohua smiled and shook his head. This little monk's luck has always been bad. I only encountered 4 forks and turned back, not daring to go forward. Haha, it's already good. Xian laughed. If you were the only one who encountered 4 forks, then this path is the right one. Hearing this, Xiaohua shook his head. There's no need to plan for the best. Senior brother Cai Hui and Grandmaster Gu Zhen's passage must also have 4 forks. Oh. Xian raised her eyebrows, not forgetting to probe. Could it be that this little monk knows how to set up a formation? Tch, Xiaohua pursed his lips. Even a child would understand this kind of little trick. How could the person who set up the formation not know? Do they still need this little monk to know how to set up a formation? Sure enough, not long after, Cai Hui and Grandmaster Gu Zhen also returned, explaining one by one. The 2 of them were a bit stronger than Xiaohua, so they each chose 2 passages and went deeper. However, later on, they both returned. It was really as Xiaohua said. They also encountered 4 forks. After hearing this, Xian smiled bitterly, saying, Actually, if we patiently explore these forks, we may be able to find a way out. Unfortunately, we have only just entered the formation. The difficult part is still inside. We can't waste time here. As she spoke, she reached out and took out a purple object that was only 3 inches long. That object was similar to sandalwood, emitting a faint trace of a meaty aroma. There was also a burnt black color on it, as if it had just been extinguished. 6 directions divine concealment incense? Xiaohua's eyes lit up. The name of this ancient object very easily appeared in his mind. At the same time, some other memories appeared. Ah! Immediately after, Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, secretly surprised. Then he suddenly understood. These memories were all given to him by the ghost cultivator Huang Yi. But before the spiritual energy was not clear, the spiritual cavities were not completely opened. Now these memories, along with the understanding of the green-robed Xiaohua and the other primordial spirits, were being absorbed by Xiaohua at an accelerated rate. What is this? Cai Hui naturally did not know, and asked in a low voice, somewhat surprised. It seems to be my Buddhist sect sandalwood? This object is called divine concealment incense. Xian raised her hand, and said with a smile, although it's called incense, in reality, it has nothing to do with your Buddhist sect. It's a secret technique of the Tao sect. I don't know what this object is made of, but after it's ignited, the incense can protect the primordial spirit. After the primordial spirit escapes, as long as the incense itself is not extinguished, no restriction can prevent the primordial spirit from escaping. Escape technique. Hearing this, Xiaohua immediately understood that this was the Tao sect's escape technique. As long as the divine concealment incense was not extinguished, its incense could provide a passage for the escaping primordial spirit. No matter where, the primordial spirit could return. Hearing this, Gu Zhen frowned and said, could it be that Xian Tanua is also proficient in the Tao sect's escape technique? Xian said with a smile. I can't be considered proficient, I only know a little. Following Xian's smile, her gaze swept over Xiaohua with interest. Damn it. Instantly, Xiaohua wanted to stomp his feet. Is there a need? If you can understand the Tao sect's magic, why can't this young master understand it? Although this young master is a Buddhist sect disciple, isn't it better to learn from others? You can't just let the state officials set fires and not let the common people light lamps, right? That's right. Previously, Xiaohua did not care about looking at her a few more times and insinuating a few more times. He also did not know where he had exposed himself, but now that he heard Xian's words, he naturally knew that this Confucian woman had already seen through the signs of his Tao sect cultivation. Of course, it could also be said that this woman was somewhat suspicious. That's not possible. Xiaohua did not look at Xian. He lowered his head and thought to himself, even if she has Tao sect cultivation, this Xiao did not use any Tao sect divine ability. Oh, I understand. The moment this Xiao entered the formation, This Xiao seemed to have activated his true essence. Perhaps at that time, she would have been able to sense the fluctuations of true essence. Alas, this little girl is still worried about this Xiao. At this moment, Xi Hui frowned and said, "In that case, Tanyue is preparing to use the escape technique of his primordial spirit to explore the path. To be precise, he is using a trace of his primordial spirit." Xian said with a smile. The Dao sect has a secret technique that can release a trace of his primordial spirit for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. If the primordial spirit is of the same mind, it can travel thousands of miles in an instant. The time it takes for an incense stick to burn is enough for this one to explore these three paths. Chapter 34-24. Xian Tanyue, be careful. Xi Hui didn't quite understand and only instructed. Xian opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of true qi onto the incense. The tip of the incense flashed brilliantly and ignited. A faint wisp of smoke shot straight into the air. "Grandmaster Guzhen, please protect this little girl." Xian's cherry lips parted slightly. She immediately sat down in the air and formed a spell that Xiaohua was unfamiliar with. Her eyes were tightly shut. Hearing this, Guzhen waved his hand and placed the huge demon-subduing pestle in front of his chest. His eyes widened, and he vigilantly patrolled the surroundings. Xiaohua didn't open his transcendence vision, so he couldn't see anything. He only saw that the incense suddenly split into three and rushed straight into the three forks. Then, the entire passage was filled with a faint smell of meat. Oh! Xian actually split into three primordial spirits? Xiaohua's eyes brightened. This guy is from a scholarly family. How does he know so many Taoist secret techniques? Even this young master doesn't know this secret technique. Just as Xiaohua was filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred, a beastly roar came from the left side of the tunnel. Soon after, the entire frozen tunnel shook. Looking at Xian, who was sitting cross-legged, a strand of golden true energy rushed out from the top of her head. In an instant, it completely protected her. The part of her face that was not covered by the true energy turned dark red. "Not good," Guzhen hurriedly said. "I'm afraid Xian Tanyue's primordial spirit is in danger." Just as he was speaking, the fragrance of the incense grew stronger. A gust of wind blew out from the other two passages and rushed in front of Xian, extinguishing the incense in an instant. "Let's go." At the same time the incense was extinguished, Xian opened her eyes. Her eyes were filled with fear. Without waiting for her to stand up, auspicious clouds immediately appeared below her and carried her towards the passage that Xiaohua just explored. "There's an essence-devouring demonic beast in that passage." Hearing the name of an essence-devouring demonic beast, Guzhen's expression changed. He waved the demon-subduing pestle in his hand and flew with Xian. Xiaohua accompanied Xi Hui and followed behind. At this time, Xian Xinrua was also familiar with the path in front. Encountering a fork, she didn't hesitate. The four of them quickly flew for another incense stick's worth of time. "Senior brother Xi Hui, what is this essence-devouring demonic beast?" Xiaohua asked in a low voice when he saw that Xian had already slowed down. "Alas, this essence-devouring demonic beast is an extinct demonic beast from ancient times. It feeds on the essence qi of both humans and demonic beasts. Neither Buddhism nor Confucianism have any effective means to resist this demonic beast. Only demonic beasts that are more powerful can resist it." Fortunately, there were very few of these demonic beasts in the world. Later on, for some unknown reason, they disappeared without a trace. This little monk has also heard about it from Confucian cultivators. "Who would have thought that we would meet here?" Xi Hui replied in a low voice. Xiaohua was deep in thought. Looking at Xian's back view in front, he said, "Looks like that trace of Xian Tanyue's primordial spirit is like throwing a meat bun at a dog. It's gone with no return." "You're the meat bun." Just as Xiaohua's voice fell, Xian immediately stopped, turned her head and scolded. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He opened his mouth to explain, but when he saw Xian's flushed face, he knew that her primordial spirit was damaged. He didn't dare to say anything and hastily shut his mouth. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't say anything, Xian, who was in a bad mood, coldly snorted. She looked around and said, "Great Master Guzhen, this one's primordial spirit is damaged. I need to take medicine to heal. I'll have to trouble Great Master Shen to protect me." Alas, Xian Tanua has worked hard. This old monk is duty-bound. Guzhen flew past Xiaohua and Xi Hui with the demon-subduing pestle in his hand. He landed at the back, facing the entrance of the passage. "This little monk will go to the front." Xiaohua was very tactful. Without waiting for Xi Hui to speak, he flew past Xian and arrived about 10 zhang in front of her. Xian took out a thumb-sized jade bottle and crushed the top of the bottle. She opened her mouth and poured a strand of golden medicinal liquid into it. Immediately, her body's true qi surged and protected her. Several strands of true qi lingered around her 7 apertures and the top of her head like small snakes. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xian opened her mouth and all the golden true qi entered her mouth. She then stood up and said, "All right, Great Master Guzhen, let's continue." Xian Tanua. Xi Hui, who had been standing not far from Xian, hurriedly asked, "Your primordial spirit is damaged. Why don't you rest for a while?" "Alas, many thanks for fellow immortals' concern." Xian sighed slightly. This one's primordial spirit was swallowed by the spirit-devouring demonic beast. If I want to recover, I'll need 3 years of hard work. Now that I've taken the soul-condensing golden liquid, my primordial spirit is temporarily protected. There won't be any big problems. There's no difference between resting more and resting less. All right, Xi Hui nodded helplessly. However, fellow immortal can't lead the way from now on. That's right. This old monk will lead the way from now on. Guzhen flew over, his voice very loud. Xian nodded. Then I'll have to trouble Great Master. No matter, Guzhen smiled. I can't accept a reward without any effort. If this old monk doesn't put in effort, wouldn't I be ashamed to face Tanua? How can this old monk reach out and take the ancient Buddha blessing? Xian smiled faintly. This one's preparations can be considered adequate. However, I didn't expect that before we even went deeper, I would feel a little defeated. This primordial spell formation is really powerful. If it weren't for Great Master, a 5th grade primordial chi senior, this one definitely wouldn't dare to go any deeper. Let's go. Guzhen waved the demon-subduing pestle in his hand and flew up first. Xian naturally followed behind, and Xiaohua brought up the rear again. Under Xian's guidance, the 4 of them flew for a while more. They saw that the frozen ice walls were gradually decreasing, and the forks in the path were also decreasing in number. After flying through a long passage where ice and water intersected, a water wall appeared in front of them. This water wall was azure in color, and didn't show any signs of being frozen. It seemed like they had reached the end of the spell formation. Lady Tanua Guzhen stopped in front of the water wall, and used his Buddhist awareness to scan the water wall that was more than 100 feet in size. He turned back and said, "How should we go next? Tanua, please cast your spell." Xian also stopped and didn't rush to answer. Instead, she flew close to the water wall and looked up and down. She even stretched out her hand and extended her soft sword, gently piercing it into the water wall. The water wall really looked like river water, and the soft sword sank into it. However, when Xian pulled out the soft sword, there was no river water on it. Strangely, Xian didn't rush to put the soft sword away after pulling it out. Instead, she put it in front of her nose and sniffed it gently. Xiaohua and Xi Hui also flew over at this time. Xi Hui stood beside Guzhen while Xiaohua flew to the water wall and asked, "Benefactor Xian, is this water wall no longer the spell formation's restriction?" There are records of this water passage in the ink cloud pupil. Although the water here isn't the river water of the Sage River, there are no restrictions inside. The spell formation's restriction is the same as the maze we're in, on the outer layer. Xian sniffed the aura on the soft sword and carefully put it away. As if she was sure, she nodded and said, "However, this river water is mixed with a highly toxic poison. No matter if it's Confucian, Buddhist, Taoist, or demon, as long as the skin touches it, it will immediately split open. No protective spells will work. Highly toxic? Then. Xiaohua frowned. How should we go over? Hee, this is where we should borrow the power of the great master. Xian turned to Guzhen and said with a smile. My original plan was to use Master Fontain's magic tool to freeze the poisonous water in this water passage, or expel it to prevent our skin from touching it. Now, with the great master's Buddhist alms bowl, we can also collect it. Naturally, this water passage can be emptied. It's that simple. Xiaohua asked in disbelief. He didn't think that the ancient spell formation only relied on poisonous water to block people. It's that simple. Xian nodded. This water passage relies on highly toxic poison. There's no antidote for the ancient poison now. If we touch it, we'll definitely die without a burial place. Of course, this passage is extremely long. Ordinary Confucian cultivators' magic tools have limited capacity, so it's difficult to collect all the poisonous water in the passage. Only Taoist magic tools and Buddhist magic tools can do it. Also, if we can't collect or freeze all the poisonous water in the passage in one go, the uncollected poisonous water in front of us will immediately trigger the restriction of the spell formation. New poisonous water will pour in again, and we'll have no choice but to return here. I see. This old monk understands. Guzhen nodded slightly, put away the demon-subduing pestle in his hand, and took out the alms bowl. He said with a smile, of course this old monk's alms bowl only collected less than half of the water in the Four Extremes mountain. Since Xian Tanua thinks it's possible, this old monk's Buddhist magic tool will definitely work. That Xiaohua said worriedly. There's already a lot of water in the great master's alms bowl. Can't you collect less water now? Ha, little monk. This old monk has already sprinkled the water in the alms bowl on the dry land on the way here. Now this alms bowl is empty. Guzhen laughed and tossed the alms bowl in his hand. The Buddhist light around him shone brightly, and his previously shrunken body expanded again, until he was about 10 feet tall. Then he formed a seal with both hands, and the Buddhist seal hit the alms bowl. The alms bowl spun and gradually expanded, flying in front of Guzhen. Guzhen flew in front of the water wall. The alms bowl spat out Buddhist light and covered the water wall. Under the Buddhist light, the water in the water wall swayed and rippled. Guzhen didn't look back and laughed. Are you all ready? We're ready. Great Master, please cast the spell in front of us. Once the poisonous water in the passage is collected, there will be a gap immediately. Great Master, please go ahead. Xian took a deep breath, and his previously flushed face had somewhat calmed down now. Ba Guzhen chanted the name of Buddha, and formed a seal with both hands. The Buddhist light above the alms bowl buzzed, and rushed into the water wall like a whirlpool on the surface of the river. Everyone's eyes fell on it expectantly. Woo as far as everyone's eyes could see. Ripples appeared on the water wall inside the Buddhist light. The ripples spread wider and deeper, forming a whirlpool. However, it was an inverted whirlpool, protruding above the water wall. Under the Buddhist light, it was gradually sucked into the alms bowl. Chapter 34:25. Come back, Guzhen roared and pushed the Buddhist light that had landed on the wall of water. The entire wall of water shook, and the water ripple that had protruded a few inches and hadn't fallen into the alms bowl was grabbed by a big hand and stuffed into the bowl. As soon as the water wave fell, the water tunnel immediately emptied a few inches of space. Xiaohua's eyes swept across the tunnel that was dozens of feet wide. The walls were like ice walls, but there was no sign of frost. Outside the mirror-like water wall, it was pitch black. There was no water grass or river fish. The Buddhist weapon of the Buddhist sect was really powerful. Xiaohua looked around for a moment, and found that the poisonous water in the tunnel had been sucked away by about a foot. Moreover, it seemed that Guzhen was doing it with ease. The speed of the poisonous water being absorbed into the alms bowl was getting faster and faster. Good. Xian smiled and clapped her hands. Although the Buddhist sect's supernatural power is not as sharp as the Tao sect's magic, it has always been able to take drastic measures. Master Guzhan's absorption of the poisonous water is better than Master Feng Tian's removal of the poisonous water. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Xiaohua said faintly. Master Guzhan's absorption of the poisonous water into the Buddhist treasure will take some time. I guess it won't be as fast as Master Feng Tian's removal of the poisonous water. In fact, instead of using the alms bowl to absorb the poisonous water, it's better for us to use the Buddhist weapon to escape through the water. What do you know? Although it's very difficult to absorb the poisonous water at the beginning, and the speed is slow, after the initial poisonous water is absorbed, the other poisonous water will flow and fill in one by one. With the push and pull, the speed will get faster and faster. Oh, and I forgot to say that the water in the tunnel is not the river water of the Saint River. Not only is it highly poisonous, but it is also mixed with the innate heavy water. As long as someone or something enters it, it will trigger the magic formation. Thousands of heavy water will press down on the person, making it impossible to move forward or backward. Xian glanced at Xiaohua unhappily. You thought of it, but I thought about it long ago. If we can walk through it, why would I bother to find Master Feng Tian? Alright, Xiaohua knew that there were many ways to break the restrictive spell, but he was only considering it from his own point of view. He didn't refute and nodded slightly. It was just as Xian had said. The first step was the most difficult step, but the next 3 meters were much easier. Master Guzhan flew faster and faster. Xiaohua and the others hurriedly urged their clouds to follow behind. It was just as Xiaohua had seen at the beginning. After entering the tunnel, there was no trace of the water wall at all. It was as smooth as a mirror. Everyone was flying in the air. On the water wall, there were several clear shadows. Xiaohua's Buddhist consciousness swept over, and was immediately absorbed by the smooth mirror surface. Xiaohua quickly withdrew his Buddhist consciousness. Looking at Xian again, she also had an unnatural expression on her face. Most likely, she had also turned into a meat bun after releasing her divine sense. Looking at Master Guzhan's Buddha body and his increasing speed, Xiaohua was shocked. He seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked, Senior Brother Xiai Hui, isn't Master Guzhan's speed too fast? Why does this little monk have the illusion that the poisonous water is absorbing Master Guzhan instead of Master Guzhan withdrawing the poisonous water? His hearing Xiaohua's words, Xiai Hui was also stunned. She took a breath and said in a low voice, Junior Brother's words also make this poor monk puzzled. Why is Grandmaster's speed increasing again and again? What do you know? Xian sneered. The water in this tunnel needs to be filled at all times. If the Grandmaster keeps the water, then the Grandmaster will have to pour even more water in. This water needs to be poured in from the front. The more water the Grandmaster keeps, the more water will pour in, and the more force the Grandmaster will use to push the Grandmaster in. As you can see, it's not that Master Guzhan is consuming too much karma, but that the formation is pushing the alms bowl with too much force. Master Guzhan has no choice but to speed up. The problem is, what if Master Guzhan's speed can't compare to the speed of the formation filling the water? Xiaohua hit the nail on the head. This Xian bit her lips and hesitated. After a moment she said, In my opinion, as long as Master Guzhan's Buddhist treasure alms bowl can hold enough poisonous water, he will be fine. Unfortunately, Xiaohua didn't let her go. He asked again, But what if Master Guzhan's alms bowl can't hold so much poisonous water? Hearing this, Xian's expression changed slightly. She stared at Xiaohua for a moment, and suddenly became furious. She shouted hysterically, How do I know what to do? I'm just a little girl. I want to come to this formation to find treasures. I racked my brains to find Mo Yuntong. According to Mo Yuntong's fragments, I repeatedly thought about it and prepared the things I needed according to my own thoughts. I didn't dare to find others, nor did I dare to tell the people around me. I painstakingly endured for more than 10 years before I found you. You have such an opportunity. Not only did you not thank me, but you also pointed here. If you have the ability, go find Mo Yuntong. If you have the ability, go find an ancient formation. You want to ask what will happen if the poisonous water comes in again? Well, then I'll tell you. I've thought about this poisonous water for a long time. Unless you don't touch it, once you touch it, even if you are a Buddhist sex arhat or a Confucian sex grandmaster, your protective true qi and other things won't work. You just need to close your eyes. Later, when you turn into a white bone, it will also float at the entrance of the formation as a warning to others. Of course, if you can speak at that time, don't let anyone in. Xian's voice wasn't soft. Her tone was very fast, as if she was anxious and angry. Looking at her face, the redness had gradually faded. Instead, it was a little pale and there were some tears in her eyes. She looked extremely wronged. Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. He didn't expect Xian to have such a reaction. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but didn't know how to comfort her, so he simply closed his mouth. However, he secretly muttered in his heart, "This little girl. What does she mean? Could it be that she came to find the immortal artifact for other purposes? Why didn't she even dare to tell her family members and instead believe outsiders?" However, it really wasn't easy for her to find so much information. Xi Hui gave Xiaohua a rare glare, then turned to Xian and said warmly, "Xian Tanua, don't be angry. Junior brother Tip only asked a few more questions for our safety. In such a dangerous place, no matter how careful we are, we can't be too careful." Xian also realized her gaffe. She slightly clenched her teeth and did her best to hold back the tears that were about to flow out. However, she wasn't willing to raise her arm and wipe it with her palace gown. After a while, she raised her head and said, "Many thanks for fellow immortals' comfort. This one understands that the little monk's words are reasonable. However, this one has been preparing for so many years. I hope fellow immortal can trust me at this moment." A low rumbling sound came from the water tunnel ahead of them. It seemed to be shaking slightly. Moreover, the Buddhist light around Gu Zhen's body began to flicker. Before Xiaohua and the others could look at Gu Zhen, the rumbling sound grew louder and louder. A moment later, a deafening sound came from the tunnel. "Not good." Gu Zhen roared. "There's too much water coming from the river ahead. This old monk's alms bowl can't hold it in." As he spoke, a stream of water flowed out from under Gu Zhen's body. Hurry! Xian's expression changed when she saw the water seeping out. She shrieked, "Master Gu Zhen, retreat quickly." "Wait a moment." Gu Zhen clenched his teeth and roared. Under the flickering Buddhist light, his Dharma body grew several meters taller. This old monk will it seem that Gu Zhen was still unwilling to give up, and wanted to struggle a few more times. However, when Xian's scorpion-like stream of river water passed by Gu Zhen's body, ripples immediately appeared on the previously tranquil water wall. These ripples rapidly rippled around the entire water wall, and when they circled around Xiaohua and the others, forming a water ring, they actually produced a crisp, pa-pa-pa sound, as if an ice river had suddenly broken, or as if a mountain rock had been broken. Immediately after, these sounds, along with the water ring, rapidly rushed behind Xiaohua and the others, wave after wave. The crisp sound was like the sound of a life-threatening drum. It spread farther and farther, echoing in the water tunnel, and knocking on the hearts of Xiaohua and the others. "This is bad." Xiaohua's face immediately turned pale. He thought of the collapse of the space tunnel in the vein of space. At this time, Xian and Xi Hui had already activated their auspicious clouds. They looked hesitantly at Gu Zhen, then at the tunnel in the distance, not knowing what to do. Boom! In front of Gu Zhen, the water wall shook violently. The water wall around half a foot collapsed, and a stream of water rushed toward Gu Zhen. Gu Zhen was shocked. He remembered Xian's words and didn't dare to let the Buddhist light touch the water. He hurriedly retreated. However, the water was too sudden. Although Gu Zhen had already retreated, a few drops of water still splashed on the Buddhist light. Zzzt, like ice water poured on boiling oil. The sound caused green smoke to rise. Gu Zhen's Buddhist light quickly faded. Go! Xian clenched her teeth and hurriedly shouted, "Ready to fly out of the tunnel first." "I'm afraid it's already too late." Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and calmly looked at the tunnel that had become a water wall in the distance. "What? How is that possible?" Xian turned pale with fright. She looked up again, and saw that the water walls of the tunnel were beginning to ripple. In the distance, the sound of a cow mooing could be heard. It was obvious that a large amount of river water had begun to pour in from the distance, or the tunnel had begun to collapse. That's impossible. Xian's flushed face was now abnormally pale. She muttered in a tone of disbelief. Mo Yuntong, there's no record of it. Xian, let this little monk ask you. At this time Xiaohua hurriedly shouted. If this tunnel collapses, can you find a way out? I can't. Xian shook her head absent-mindedly. There's one thing I didn't say before. The poisonous water in this tunnel is no different from the river water. We can't distinguish the direction by using imperial equipment and other things. We can only suck the poisonous water out or freeze it. Good. Xiaohua shouted at Gu Zhen, who had already fled back in embarrassment. Great master, please hold on for a moment. This little monk will join hands with you to suck the poisonous water in front of us. Now we can only go forward. Retreat will only lead to death. You? Xian was stunned. Her eyes were wide open. She looked up and down at Xiaohua, feeling a burst of disbelief. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.